Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through a crack in the centuries and land on a crag above the Euphrates River. The moon scissoring slow silver ribbons across the black water below. Cicadas hum like an unplugged phone charger, and you can feel the dry night air brushing your arms the way parchment rubs under a scribe's quill. You're about to nose your way into a Spartan banquet so strict it could pass a military inspection, and Dionysus, god of ecstatic in-your-face partying, has already been banned at the door. You probably won't survive this if you show up, smelling like a winery, or worse, wearing leopard print. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can map this sleepy little legion of history nerds across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Descend a goat path lit by the mild glow of oil lamps, each flame bobbing like tiny fireflies trapped in clay. The smell of warmed olive wood pinches your nose. An unseen cook is stoking the coals for what the Spartans smugly call a proper meal. Proper, in this town, means you'll be offered a bowl of black broth so salty it makes seawater look like baby formula. According to one bemused Athenian traveler, the recipe included pig's blood simmered with vinegar, and he quipped that the stuff made him appreciate death as an alternative. Seasoning your first light joke of the night. Historians still argue whether the infamous black broth was a daily staple or just an occasional test of character. But you steel yourself regardless. As you pad closer, the stone walls of the communal dining hall loom, stark and undecorated. A sharp contrast to the Athenian habit of plastering everything with bright frescoes. A mainstream fact washes over you. Every Spartan male citizen belonged to a syssitia, a mess group where he ate nightly with comrades. The practice rooted in the reforms of the semi-legendary lawgiver Lycurgus. Attendance was mandatory. Absence required a reason as serious as attending your own funeral. The idea was simple bond the warriors overshared, hardship and minimal luxury, so they'd fight like brothers when the Persians turned up again. You pause by a marble pillar and spot something the tour brochures never show. A small clay figurine of Dionysus half buried in dust behind a stack of shields. Its tiny ceramic lips curve into a grin that feels downright cheeky, like someone sneaking a whoopee cushion onto a senator's seat. Quirky tidbit number 1. Despite Sparta's iron reputation, private shrines to fun gods did exist. Whispers of color under the monochrome. The city wasn't entirely allergic to joy. It just insisted on rationing it the way other places ration grain inside. The torches cast honey and amber arcs across wooden benches. You trace a fingertip over a scratchy surface where board hoplites have carved. Tight ice tactile grids proof that even professional soldiers crave a silly distraction. It's nearly dinner time, yet conspicuously absent are the squat, wide-bellied. Craters meant for wine dilution, you arch a brow. In most Greek Calais, everybody mixed wine with water, sometimes perfuming it with pine resin to keep it fresh. But tonight, the only liquid you see is the ominous sheen of that black broth bubbling. In a bronze cauldron. Second light joke, you wonder whether the cook accidentally dropped his tax records into the pot because it smells like boiled bureaucracy. Hush tremor passes through the hall when a slave scurries in to whisper something to an elder. You catch only a few excited syllables. The god, the ivy crown. City gates before he vanishes again. The elder scowls, transmitting the bad news to his table with a pursed-lip glare. Even without subtitles, you sense the message. Dionysus has arrived at the outskirts and is asking, politely for now, to join the festivities. But the Ephors, those 5 annually elected guardians of Spartan law, have already posted an official decree barring him. Their argument? His presence would corrode discipline faster than rust on a spearhead. And the last thing the city wants is hoplites breakdancing on their shields at sunrise. You park yourself on a low stool careful. It wobbles like a three-legged stray goat and overhear one more delicious snippet. A junior officer jokes that if Dionysus tries to crash the party, they'll just challenge the god to finish a single bowl of black broth. If he survives, maybe then they'll talk treaties. You stifle a laugh, completing our third light joke. Quota, though you feel a faint shiver. Challenging a deity with culinary torture seems like poking a bear while holding honey-covered drumsticks. A breeze snakes through the open doorway, carrying a fringe of flute music from the village outskirts. The notes are sweet, lilting, downright persuasive, and they clash violently with the steady drum of Spartan discipline you've been hearing all evening bootsteps. Shield clanks, the occasional barked command. This is the sonic fault line, upon which our story balances. One camp worships order, the other exults in chaos. Which one will snap first? You study the men around you. Bronze cuirasses rest against walls, helms stacked like iron mushrooms, yet the soldiers themselves wear simple wool chitons. Every haircut is identical cropped close, no nonsense. Sparta's austere aesthetic extends to grooming. Long hair was allowed mainly after active service, by which point the city trusted you not to braid it with daisies. And lurking in the back of your mind is a half-remembered rumor. Some scholars suspect Spartans looked down on wine, not because it caused drunkenness, but because they associated vineyards with messy Athenian trade networks. Historians still argue whether this disdain was economic snobbery or pure moral posturing, but either way, Dionysus represents everything their legal code seeks to throttle. The oil lamps sputter, and for a heartbeat the hall dips into shadow, before reigniting in a mellow glow. You feel the space inhale, as though the building itself expects confrontation any minute. Outside, that flute melody sharpens, gains percussion, perhaps a tympanum hand drum, another sign that Dionysus is. Entourage is inching closer, entourage meaning satyrs, maenads, and maybe a donkey carrying extra party hats. Spartan scouts at the gate probably don't know whether to laugh, pray, or call for reinforcements. Somewhere deeper in the complex, a bronze gong tolls the start of the communal meal. Around you, warriors march to their benches with the resigned. Camaraderie of co-workers heading toward a mandatory HR workshop. You lift your bowl. The broth is a viscous midnight, dotted with tiny islands of rendered fat. It smells like a blacksmith's apron after a rainstorm. First sip, your eyes water. Second sip, your tongue begs for a transfer to another mouth. Yet you force it down, partly from peer pressure, partly because you want to see this banquet through. If Dionysus is going to crash the scene, you'll need to be awake, though the salt content alone might keep your heart thumping like it's late for muster. A low conversation grows at the high table where older commanders sit. One mentions that during the previous Carnea festival, a few off-duty soldiers secretly visited a neighboring village to sample wine, and they ended up singing bawdy verses about King Leonnes's beard. The scandal had to be hushed up with extra drills and a public sacrifice to Apollo. Quirky tidbit number 2, Apollo and Myclae, only a day's march from here, housed a colossal statue so tall its head poked above the temple roof like a giant. Teenager forbiddance from slouching. You glance at the doorway once more. The moon has climbed, casting a white ladder across the courtyard. If Dionysus arrives tonight, he'll ascend those rungs of light like a performer stepping onto a stage. And you, lucky insomniac traveler, will have a front row seat. The air tingles with that pre-storm hush, except the thunder, should it come, will be measured in drum beats and intoxicating fragrance instead of raindrops. You push aside your now empty bowl and listen. Heartbeats syncing with distant drums. Discipline versus delirium, Sparta versus Dionysus. The first skirmish is minutes away, You set the bowl down, wipe a smear of grease from your lip with the back of your hand, and instantly regret the gesture the broth's iron tang now perfumes. Your knuckles like budget cologne. Around you, the bare stone hall is filling, each wooden bench whining under the arrival of fresh muscle. The ceiling rafters lurk high in the gloom, thick enough to hang an ox, though tonight they dangle only. Soot-dark spider webs that sway whenever the door bangs open. A slave slides past carrying a wicker tray of coarse barley bread, the kind so dense it could double as a discus. Joke number 1 tumbles out of your brain. If a Persian arrow storm ever pierces Spartan shields, the men can just raise their loaves overhead and wait for the carbs to deflect the danger. Asterisk. You notice again that nagging absence row after row of broad-bellied craters sit upside down on a sideboard, mouths sealed by wooden plugs. They're visibly unused. A fine film of dust dulls the once red gloss of their painted satyrs. You imagine those creatures winking from the pottery, offended at this forced unemployment. A hoplite opposite you follows your gaze and offers a half-shrug, half-smirk. Empty vessels make for sharper minds, he mutters, then tears bread with. The decisive snap of a man severing bad habits. Mainstream historical fact. Spartans believed moderation in drink preserved readiness for sudden military mobilization. Kings kept trackers who could rally citizens within an hour of sunrise. Even a mild hangover would be considered treasonous. Sluggishness, yet self-congratulation can't mask longing. A younger warrior named Myrtilos sighs theatrically. He tips an imaginary cup toward you and whispers that last spring an Athenian merchant smuggled in a skin of sweet Lemnian wine. The guard who caught him confiscated the contraband and drank it himself behind the barracks. Quirky tidbit, rumor, says that same guard later invented a wine-free wine by steeping pomegranate peel in boiled turnip juice. He marketed it as Spartan Burgundy, until the ephors sentenced him to muck latrine duty. The hall chuckles, low and conspiratorial, because even in a city of iron, irony survives. Platters of roasted goat arrive. The meat has been cooked thrice to banish every hint of succulence, leaving fibers so tight they squeak when chewed. Someone passes you a sprig of savory herbs, the solitary nod to flavor. Joke number 2 pops out before you can throttle it. You wonder if the goat died of boredom rather than the butcher's knife. A seasoned veteran at your flank spits a crumb and laughs, shoulders shaking beneath his threadbare cloak. He slaps your back hard enough to rattle your ribs. Acceptance earned. Between bites you scan the room. Against the far wall hang twin shields emblazoned not with the famous lambda, but with small ivy leaves, hastily painted over. They're trophies from a skirmish with Arcadian revelers decades ago, proof that even the most disciplined army occasionally raids the party supply store. You trace the leaves in memory, and a question presses forward. Is Dionysus merely a nuisance, or a mirror showing Spartans what they've sacrificed? Historians still argue whether Spartan austerity was born purely from Lycurgan legislation, or whether it calcified later, a defensive shell against seductive foreign luxuries overflowing the Mediterranean trade routes. That debate flickers like a candle, feeding your thoughts as effectively as any course being served. The gong sounds again, softer this time, calling for silence. A gray-bearded polemarch part general, part etiquette enforcer rises, stretches the stiffness from his shoulders, and recites a moral maxim handed down through the agoge. He who masters appetite masters fear. The line is simple, but the men mouth it along in unison, a lullaby for grown soldiers. Mainstream fact number 2. Every Spartan boy entered the agoge at 7, enduring 2 decades of state education so immersive that many forgot their birth family's dialects. Tonight's supper, like every ritual, reinforces that schooling. Pleasure must earn its keep one drop at a time. You swallow a last shred of goat and feel it descend like a splinter. The hall buzzes with muted conversation. Nobody dares rise until the polemarch sits, so everyone settles into small talk about shield repairs, craps, and whether helot gossip counts as reliable intelligence. From beyond the door comes a faint trill of pipes higher, more insistent now than in Section 1, like a bird refusing to leave before dawn. The Spartan beside you stiffens, knuckles whitening around his spoon. "He's testing us," he mutters. You don't have to ask who. A slim corridor leads off the dining space into a storage alcove. Curiosity, or maybe boredom, pulls you toward it. Clay jars stack floor to ceiling, cords of dried figs hang like earthen chandeliers, and thereat, waist height, sits a single amphora sealed with beeswax, stamped in the shape of a grape cluster. You run a fingertip across the wax. The seal is unbroken. Overhead drips a slow leak from the roof, each droplet tapping the lid in a hollow rhythm, almost a heartbeat. You imagine cracking the amphora, drinking quick, dousing the constant. Itch of salt on your tongue. Joke number 3 emerges, muttered only to yourself. Stealing this amphora would constitute both the shortest and the longest. Suicide note in Spartan history. You return to the hall, exactly as a group of youth choristers. Files in, chanting an ancient Terpaic ode. Their voices hover, brittle yet strangely soothing. One verse praises Artemis Orthia, protector of Sparta's borders. Another verse, rarely sung, mentions Dionysus by name, crediting him for teaching vines to crawl upon Mount Taygetus. The lines slip out as naturally as breath, and you watch the elders exchange startled glances. Who approved that stanza? Suddenly the door slams open, wind whipping torches sideways. A scout, helmet askew, panting like a bellows, bows before the high table. The god's train approaches. Satyrs, women, drums. They won't stop at the outer farms. His tone suggests something between awe and gastric distress. The polemarch weighs a reply, but first signals for the craters, those dusty, snubbed vessels, to be relocated from sight. 2 attendants rush to obey, tipping the pottery on its side and rolling each piece behind woven screens, as if dismantling temptation might immunize the men from whatever revel barrels down the main road. Their urgency betrays the city's secret. They fear the sight of pleasure almost more than pleasure itself. You feel the atmosphere pivot, like a phalanx executing a flawless right wheel. Conversations tighten into tactical murmurs. Shields scrape stone. One man discreetly checks the edge of his short sword against his thumb, then hides the gesture beneath his cloak. But there is no formal call to arms. The enemy, if you can call a wine god an enemy, fights with fragrance and rhythm. Sparta must answer in silence and self-denial, its oldest weapons. Overhead, smoke funnels toward a roof vent, drawing your gaze to the crossbeams again. Someone years ago carved a tiny maze into one beam, perhaps a tribute to the legendary. Labyrinth. Quirky tidbit too for tonight. Certain Spartan youths carved secret labyrinths on barracks walls, believing these doodles could trap nightmares before they slithered into sleeping minds. You trace the shape with your eyes, wondering whether such folk magic works on divine nightmares too. Another waft of music slips through the open doorway, now layered with jingling cymbals. It coils around your ears, tempting as ripe figs. The Spartans' discipline chatter fractures. Heads tilt, feet tap despite orders. Somewhere a soldier hums a counter-melody before clapping a hand over his mouth, embarrassed at the slip. Pleasure is an infection, and tonight the pathogen is airborne. The polemarch rises again. "Brothers," he says, voice even. "The city's law is clear. No wine tonight, no revel. Remember the oath you made when you first sat at this table." As he speaks, he breaks a barley loaf in two and sets the halves apart, a symbolic cutting off of indulgence. Yet the broken bread bleeds crumbs that look suspiciously like grape seeds in the torchlight, and your imagination rushes ahead to Dionysus's arrival, to ivy curling under doors, to tambourines rattling until every stone in this hall vibrates like a drunk cicada. Your pulse thrums. Out beyond the torches waits a contest not of swords, but of stories, the Spartan ideal that fear breeds strength, pitted against the Dionysian creed that joy scrapes truth raw. You spoon the last broth from your bowl, swallow hard, and feel salt. Tighten your cheeks. Battle lines are drawn in your own mouth, bitter versus sweet, discipline versus delight. You suspect the god will enter whether the ephors approve or not. And when he does, these bare walls might discover a crack you can pour a river through. For now, you sit, eyes on the doorway, waiting for music to become footsteps, for footsteps to become confrontation. The broth settles heavy in your gut like a promise you're not sure you meant to make. The hall exhales you into the night like a stone coughing up a spark, and at once the air tastes different, less briny, more electric, as if the breeze itself has dipped a toe into Dionysus's wineskin. You lean against a column, palate still coated in broth salt, and watch two very different legacies jostle for territory inside your skull. On one side squats Sparta's marble-hard discipline, gymnastic drills at dawn, iron currency meant to deter hoarding, marriage ceremonies so brisk, the bride sometimes had to be kidnapped just to keep things interesting. On the opposing ridge lounges Dionysus's velvet-loud revel, ivy-crowned dancers, goatskin drums, a philosophy that insists ecstasy is proof the cosmos still cares. The two codes glare at each other like rival playlists fighting for the same. Bluetooth speaker, a fresh gust carries distant drum beats, dum-da-dum soft. But the rhythm already rearranges the cadence of your breathing. Yet directly behind you, from inside the dining hall, growls the counter-tempo of discipline, the scrape of bowls stacked, the click of bronze greaves being rebuckled in case things get lively, which is Spartan for on the brink of socially catastrophic fun. Joke number one skitters out before you can leash it. If these soldiers ever hosted a children's birthday party, the pinata would swing empty just to reinforce resilience. You shove hands into your cloak and walk the colonnade, boots crunching on mosaic pebbles that depict ironically a grapevine frozen mid-curl. The artisans must have snickered as they laid each tessera. A mainstream historical fact paces beside. You, archaeological digs under modern-day Sparta have revealed precious few luxury mosaics compared to contemporary Athens, underscoring just how allergic these people were to decorative excess. Even their artistry seems to apologize for existing. Crossing the courtyard, you spot a slim training track where boys of the Agoj normally race at sunrise. Tonight it's deserted, lit only by a sliver of moon, but you can picture adolescent silhouettes sprinting barefoot over packed earth, chanting meters from tertiaries, Sparta's warrior poet whose verses slapped courage onto hearts like war paint. The boys ran not for prizes, but for conditioning. The only trophy was permission to keep breathing under harsher drills. Historians still argue whether such relentless regimentation produced unbeatable warriors or merely repressed poets forced to speak with spears instead of syllables, and you find yourself siding with the jilted syllables. Your foot nudges something, half buried in abandoned flute carved from bone. You lift it, thumb the finger holes, and a wild impulse says blow. But you imagine the reaction, 30 armed men hurtling out to confiscate your lungs for unauthorized melody. Better not. You slip the flute into your belt just in case the night requires an emergency serenade. Quirky tidbit of the hour. Certain Spartan sentries were trained to mimic owl hoots on flutes to signal an all clear. The tradition faded once actual owls began responding and confusing the watch rotation. Past the training track stretches the sacred path toward the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia, torches lining the route like patient chess pieces. You wander halfway, thoughts ping-ponging between the two codes. Discipline is certainty shields interlocked, laws carved in bone, feelings folded small enough to fit beneath helmets. Ecstasy is surrender voices raised, limbs loosened, logic dissolved into grape. Sweetness. Joke number 2. Telling a Spartan to relax is like telling a goat to knit. Technically possible, but you're going to lose an eye testing the theory. Halfway down the path you pause, hearing an echo off the river, laughter layered over cymbals, perhaps 2 furlongs away. It's a lush, tumbling sound, nothing like thee. Clip chuckles aloud inside the mess hall. The audio feels invasive, voluptuous, a warm hand cupping your earlobe. You glance back and catch sight of Captain Anaxandrides standing near the gate, arms folded, jaw working like he's chewing. Nails for dessert. He embodies the marble code, but even he cannot stop his foot tapping a fractional beat behind the distant drums. Civilization, you decide, is mostly people pretending the music isn't there. You step aside as a pair of Ephoras stride past, cloaks flaring. Their conversation drips with legalese. One quotes an old decree: no foreign deity may override the customs of Lycurgus. The other counters with precedent from a century-old drought when they invited Poseidon to bless the wells. The first retorts that water is necessity, wine is indulgence. They vanish into the gloom, leaving you to wonder where the line between need and want really sits. Maybe it's drawn by whichever god stands closer at the moment, lightning quick. Memory, an Athenian symposium you once crashed, where philosophers argued that discipline without delight curdles into tyranny, whereas delight without discipline evaporates into chaos. The host solved the stalemate by ordering more wine. The debate ended in a pillow fight. You almost missed those feathered missiles right now. Joke number 3 rises like a burp. Offer Spartans pillows, and they'll probably stuff them into bronze helmets for extra neck support. Luxury disguised as practicality. Approaching the perimeter wall, you find a watchtower where 2 guards peer out at the darkened hills. One mutters that the revelers carry torches shaped like pine cones, a design allegedly invented by Dionysus himself to signify evergreen joy. Mainstream fact slides in, ancient torch races during the Panathenaic festival employed similar pine resin bundles, their slow burn perfect for nocturnal processions. The guard spits. Looks like a bonfire wedding, he growls, though you catch envy laced beneath the disdain. A third guard beneath the tower ties a red ribbon round his wrist, tucks it under his bracer, and flashes you a guilty grin. He claims, it's merely a lucky charm, but red is the color of wine, of flushed cheeks, of permission. Acts of rebellion start small a ribbon, a hum, an eye that lingers too long on a distant torch. Dionysus's army may not carry swords, yet its advanced scouts already infiltrate Spartan flesh. You sense the city vibrating between extremes, each heartbeat deciding order or rapture, rapture or order. The stone beneath your solace seems to pulse like a drumskin pulled tight across an amphora mouth. Somewhere ivy pushes a fresh tendril through a roof tile. Somewhere a soldier inhales and mistakes it for a side dot across the Eurota's plain. The revel procession finally crests a low ridge. Torches bob like fireflies the size of dreams. You hear the goat leather tympanon. You hear feminine ululations, braided with baritone shouts. The sound is neither music nor war cry, but something spliced from both, eager to seduce or destroy depending on who opens the gate. You realize the clash of codes may not end with one triumphing. Sometimes opposites collide simply to remind mortals they are elastic enough to stretch between them. Back at your original column, you stand at the fault line. Behind you, austere hall, empty craters hidden, soldiers re-armored in self-denial. Ahead of you, god of wine striding in leopard skin, vines poised like question marks. Historians still argue whether Sparta ever truly barred Dionysus, or if tales of banishment are moral fables concocted by later writers to dramatize cultural tension. Either way, the myth you're living tonight vibrates more real than polished. Fact up, the drums swell. The hall doors groan as they swing wider, elders pouring out to confront the incoming glitter. You draw a stunning breath that tastes of iron story and sweet speculation blended at last. The first torchlight kisses the outer wall. Ivy leaf shadows jitter across stone like dancers warming ankles before the show. A collision is scheduled for the next heartbeat, and you're standing at ground zero, armed only with a stolen bone flute and the memory of broth so bleak it might pass for penance in a friendlier religion. Choose your anthem, Traveler, because the night won't wait. When the torches first kiss the wall, your curiosity snap hooks you out through a half-latched postern gate and into raw night. No guard even notices because everyone inside is busy deciding whether to pray or puke. You skid down a chalky slope and land, rather unheroically, in a tuft of thyme. Dust puffs up, sharp and herbal, coating your tongue like a gourmet cough drop. Ahead stretches the moon-washed Peloponnese road, a ribbon of crushed limestone and cart grooves that glimmer like pale scars. And there, maybe 2 bow shots north, strides the entourage, cymbals like dragonflies of brass, pipes lofting a melody so tipsy it staggers even in the open air, and Dionysus himself riding a wagon made of, is that wicker? Yes, but it looks confident about it. You jog to join the parade, heart hammering because technically you're defecting from Spartan hospitality after one bowl of soup. Etiquette purists would call that a treasonous appetizer. Joke number 1 crackles out as you pant beside a satyr. You whisper that Sparta's black broth might actually ferment if left too long, thereby creating a beverage the city could drink without admitting it's wine. The satyr snorts, spraying droplets that smell like goat and merlot, then hands you a spray of ivy as if you've earned your backstage pass. Dionysus notices you, of course he does. His eyes glow like garnets under lamplight, and he offers an unmistakable nod, permission to walk alongside, maybe even permission to question why the god of revelry is choosing to flirt with a city that polices smiles. Mainstream historical fact breaks stride beside you. By the classical era, Dionysus's cult had spread from Thrace all the way to colonies on the Black Sea, often meeting resistance from conservative city-states exactly because its rites loosened social hierarchies for a night. Sparta, predictably, wrote itself an exemption slip. The procession's energy is half carnival, half military column, except instead of shield clacks, you hear tambourines. And instead of marching commands, you get spontaneous poetry in dialect. A menad draped in fox fur leaps down from the wagon to adjust your ivy crown. Apparently you were wearing it crooked like a tourist. She giggles, telling you the proper tilt is just enough to keep secrets from rolling out of your ear. You store that line for future cocktail parties, assuming you survive tonight. Behind you a gaggle of hoplites off-duty, or perhaps deserters chasing gossip trail the parade at a safe distance. You catch their mutters, their betting drachmas, on whether the city gate remains barred, whether Dionysus will sprout vines from the ramparts, or whether the ephors will cave before sunrise. One muscular lad wagers his prized iron spit, proclaiming, "If the god breaches those walls, I'll join him and trade my spear for a thyrsus." Joke number 2. His friend replies that handling a thyrsus is still technically pokey work, but at least the grapes on top make friendlier bruises. You glance at Dionysus again. His leopard skin mantle flutters, and for a heartbeat you think the spots rearrange into a map of Greece. Corinth shining at the nape, Argos tucked under an armpit, a reminder the god's domain is bigger than any polis's pride. Historians still argue whether Dionysus originated as a foreign import or as a repressed local nature spirit retrofitted with exotic flair. Whichever version you believe, The power before you tonight feels older than marble, juicier than myth. Road dips into an olive grove where trunks twist like ancient wrestlers locked in stalemate. Fireflies gather, drawn to torchlight, and the combined glow makes each oil lamp bloom into a halo. You can almost taste chlorophyll on every breath, a green perfume that pairs oddly well with the distant cinnamon bark burning in the wagon's brazier. Quirky tidbit sidles up. Some rural Dionysian followers chew fresh olive leaves before nocturnal dances, claiming the mild bitterness keeps them alert enough to dodge satyrs with questionable manners. Ah, pair of silver ankleted boys weave through. The crowd, scattering rose petals imported from Samos, you overhear as casual as a baker tossing sesame seeds. Petals whirl, catch on beards, stick to goat hair. One lands on your nose. You sneeze, which accidentally plays a note on the bone flute tucked at your belt. The sound is shrill and off-key, yet strangely complimentary, and a nearby cymbalist laughs, declaring you chief flutist for the next mile. You protest you only know 2 owlish calls, but apparently that qualifies. Suddenly you're part of the band, proof that in this entourage, credentials arrive exactly 1 breath before performance. Sprawling ahead is the Eurotas Plain, shimmering under star-syrup skies. You spot the torch-lit spine of Sparta's walls. Barely visible above the tree line, a stern silhouette against soft mist. The hoplites behind you fall into heated debate about whether the city's famed. A gauge can prepare soldiers for psychological warfare waged with rhythm. One jokes about forming an anti-tambourine phalanx, shields overlapping to block sound waves. Joke number 3. His comrade retorts they'd still hear muffled jingles, turning the formation into Greece's most awkward maraca. A chill surfaces if the gate stays sealed. This joyous column might slam into stone, and gods have been known to retaliate. Mainstream fact number 2 strides up. During the mythic incident at Thebes, King Pentheus attempted to suppress Dionysian rites and ended up famously dismembered by his own mother. Greek tragedy's way of writing, don't block the vibe. Everyone in this procession remembers that cautionary tale, even if they pretend not to. You angle closer to Dionysus's wagon, compelled to ask a treasonously practical question. What's the plan if they ignore your knock? His smile is both kind and terrifying. Wine sings through walls, he replies. Stone just hasn't learned the chorus yet. With a flick of his wrist, he sprinkles a handful of wet crimson. Seeds pomegranate onto the road. Each seed sizzles, burrows, and by the time the last foot passes, tender green shoots erupt, trailing tiny purple petals in their wake. Earth itself taps along to the beat, now dot lights ahead. Watchfires on. Sparta's rampart flare brighter, clearly spotting the approach. Trumpets bleat warning calls, short, clipped, and, you hate to admit, a bit panicked. The hoplites trailing you trade coin with unspoken resignation. Apparently, the disaster odds are paying out early. You breathe deep, prepping your bone. Flute for whatever tune surfaces owl or warbler, or just one long exhale. Moments later, the procession halts at a fork where a humble, rural shrine to Demeter squats beneath a cypress. Dionysus hops off his wagon barefoot, pats the unmortared altar, and pours a libation from a wineskin shaped like a laughing boar. Wine spills across the stones, releasing a steam scented like mulled figs. The followers bow their heads, but you notice the second act. Ivy sprouts from each stone block, quick as spilled ink. Demeter's shrine blushes emerald, perhaps consenting to her half-brother's mischief. Quirky tidbit too. Some rustic farmers once grafted grapevines onto cypress roots, believing the marriage of symbols would secure both fertility and endurance. The experiment mostly produced confused woodpeckers. The god remounts, flicks his thyrsus. Drums regain tempo, faster now, an audible smirk. The plain between you and Sparta compresses, every footstep pushing 2 destinies closer. You wonder if any law, any past sacrifice can outweigh the hunger that hums in human bellies for flavor, story, and the head tilt laughter that only arrives when rules loosen their belts. Historians still argue whether Sparta's rigidity was sustainable or whether its very survival demanded periodic doses of controlled frenzy mini-holidays from severity to keep the populace from calcifying. Tonight may add a footnote to that. Ongoing debate.wind whips through olive branches, scattering a confetti of silver leaves that flash like coins paying admission to the finale. Somewhere behind you, the hoplites break into a rowdy chorus of a marching song garbled. Yes, but shockingly harmonious with the satyr's pipes. You smile. Contradictions are hugging already. The city walls draw close enough that you can see sentries, helmet crests outlined in torch sputter. A silence falls over the entourage, but it's a pregnant silence, the kind a drumbeat deliberately skips to heighten the crash to come. You raise the bone flute, check your ivy crown's tilt, and step until your toes meet the first defensive. Ditch. Above, the stone bulwark looms, cool and judge-eyed. Below, vine stream of clinging. Between them stands you, mortal hinge on which two universes might swing open, music or spear point, cup or shield. Inhale, the dust smells suddenly like both. Exhale, the first satyr knocks on the gate with the butt of his staff. 3 polite taps etched across centuries. History waits for the latch. The knock still vibrates through the cedar. Planks when a satyr beside you pops a cork with his teeth, downs half a wineskin, then belches gossip loud enough to rattle Orion. Did you hear? He says, eyes wide like a gossip column carved in granite, about the time we sacked 15 amphorae in one toss at Naxos. You arch an eyebrow. He takes your silence as license to overshare. Yeah, he continues, tail flicking like a metronome. God tosses a grape, lands dead center in the courtyard. Amphorae go boom. Wine fountain taller than Poseidon's ego. Locals called it the Red Sea, except nobody tried to part it. They just swam. His buddy counters with an even juicier rumor. Forget Naxos. Remember Corinth? One flute solo won. And every jar in the royal cellar cracked. Wine dripped through the floor, baptizing the treasury. King's accountants are still drunk on the smell. Joke number 1 skitters out of you, whispered behind a cupped hand. Best audit ever assets liquidated literally. The satyrs slap their hairy. Knees and hell dot the tailies spread down the column like wildfire over dry time. Maenads start reenacting amphora explosions with dramatic swoops of their arms, each shatter punctuated by cymbal crashes. You realize the rumors serve a strategic purpose, psychological artillery aimed straight at Spartan ears lurking. Beyond the gate slits, if terror of Dionysus's revelry doesn't unbar the doors, perhaps fear of broken property will. Historians still argue whether such traveling gossip was spontaneous or choreographed. Propaganda soundbite missiles delivered ahead of the gods' advance. Either way, tonight the stories have teeth. A clatter above. Someone on the wall drops. A bronze ladle in surprise. Clearly the rumors have reached the guards. You catch muttered counting 1, 2, 3, like they're inventorying how many amphorae they can spare before civic panic erupts. Mainstream historical fact strolls. In, Sparta imported most of its fine pottery from Athenian workshops. Smashing jars here means waiting weeks for replacements, and austerity doesn't excuse drinking water from helmets. The satyrs shift tactics, now whispering scandalous vignettes about Spartan elders themselves. Old Iotrocles, one Snickers, once tried grape, mussed on a sore throat, coughed purple for a week, blamed it on pomegranate juice. A Maenad adds, an Archelaus. He secretly watered lily with diluted wine flowers, bloomed too bright. Wife burned the bed sheets, fearing. Witchcraft. Joke number 2. You mumble that at least the lily got a last drink before being grounded. The group erupts again. laughter leaping over the ditch and into Watchman's ears. Your stolen bone flute suddenly feels hot against your belt, a reminder of your alcohol credentials. You raise it, blow 2 soft notes, and the echoes ricochet, off stone like tiny ceramic cracks. A Spartan voice from the parapet hollers, "Enough!" But there's a tremble in the command. Dionysus catches the quaver, turns, and gives you a conspiratorial nod. The rumors are working. The wall itself seems to lean closer, eavesdropping. The god steps forward, letting the moon paint leopard spots brighter. "Tell them," he says to the satyrs, "about Teos." Prompted, they recount how an entire vineyard town once hosted his festival, only to discover their wine had fermented twice overnight, doubling potency and having caution. Amphory burst. Roof stripped crimson. Goats allegedly staggered home. Swinging dithyrambs. Quirky tidbit number 1. One T. and Vintner later patented split-neck jars with tiny clay gutters so over-fermented wine could escape without exploding. Archaeologists still find those odd jars, unsure whether they were engineering marvels or proof the party never left. Above, you hear debates blossoming like unwelcome flowers. Is it blasphemy to refuse a god entry? Will wine seep through our walls if we hold? Questions volley faster than hoplite javelins. Someone cites Lycurgan law. Someone else counters with the Delphic oracle that once warned, "Lock not pleasure out, lest sorrow sneak in." The voices echo through arrow slits, and you savor the irony. The normally unified Spartan chorus now singing off-key because of whispered amphora. Nightmares dot down at ground level. A more practical satyr eyes the ditch and grins. He drops a grape in, and within breaths, a snarl of vines erupts, bridging the gap. The growth halts right before touching the fortification, as if the plant itself is teasing. Joke number 3 pops from your lips, smart minds waiting. For an engraved invitation, laughter ripples. Even the maenads clap at your timing. You feel a tug on your cloak, one of the hoplites who shadowed the parade. He slipped through the revelers, helmet under arm, cheeks flushed from either fear or borrowed wine. "Is it true?" He whispers, eyes darting. "That wine can bend bronze?" You recall a rumor. Blacksmiths sometimes use diluted wine to quench red-hot blades, claiming tannins tempered metal smoother than water. Historians still argue whether this was science or superstition, but tonight you nod solemnly. The hoplite swallows, looking at his spear like it might suddenly sing falsetto dot above. Torches jitter. A different voice, a calmer baritone you recognize. As Captain Anaxandrides orders the gates barred tighter. Yet the chain clank rings defensive, not decisive. The rumors have carved hairline fractures in Spartan resolve just as effectively as they once shattered amphory. You picture elders clutching cloaks inside the council chamber, fearing not invasion but embarrassment. Cracked jars, spilled discipline, songs of their austerity turning into jokes for bards down every coastline. Quirky tidbit number 2 lands. In your memory, during certain rural Dionysia, villagers told intentionally exaggerated tales of past festivals, goats sprouting wings after too much wine, amphory exploding into constellations, believing hyperbole itself honored the god. Tonight's stories follow that sacred exaggeration blueprint, weaponized against Sparta's weak spot, its reputation for unbreakable control. The satyrs begin a call and response chant about clay hearts and crimson truth, each line punctuated by a stomp that rattles your ribs. You add flute trills between verses, discovering the instrument's squeal pairs nicely with cymbal shimmer. The melody vorns through arrow slits. Helmet silhouettes shift like nervous sundials in firelight. Finally, a narrow panel in the gate. Tongues open. An elder's face appears wrinkled parchment, eyes sharp as whetted obsidian. "These are lies," he rasps. "Sparta fears no jug, no grape, no cracked clay." Dionysus saunters forward, offers the man a single grape. "Then prove it," the god purrs, by tasting rumor. The elder hesitates. You sense the mass breath of both camps freeze like dew. He declines, panel slams shut, but the hesitation is public, painted in torch-bright relief. Within seconds, satyrs twist the scene into a fresh rumor. Spartan elders tremble before a grape. The chant echoes, laughter erupts, and you can almost hear cloaks clutch tighter within the courtyard. Mainstream historical fact. Number 2 strolls across your thoughts. Greek oral culture thrived on quicksilver rumor. A city's prestige could rise or fall before the truth even saddled its horse. Tonight, each shattered amphora tale chips at Sparta's gleaming myth of fearlessness. Dionysus lifts both arms, and the music stops on a dime. Silence spreads, taut as a bowstring. Stone of Sparta. He calls. I offer one more knock answer with hospitality or with cracks. His knuckles rap the cedar thrice, echoing like a hammer on empty jars. You hold your breath, ivy crown prickling. Rumors have done their work. The next sound will reveal whether fear of shame outweighs fear of surrender. Inside the wall, hurried voices overlap. A latch grinds halfway, then stops. You picture elders hovering, palm sweaty, calculating cost. In pottery shards versus moral shards, torchlight flickers overhead, making the fortification look suddenly fragile, like baked clay rather than eternal stone. Perhaps you think every city is an amphora waiting for the right frequency of rumor to ring it open. You peel away from the torchlit standoff, just long enough to duck through a servant's sallyport and elbow-wide gap you spotted earlier when you were still leaking. Black broth tears. The hoplite with the red ribbon waves you through. Apparently, rumor and curiosity have turned him into a part-time tour guide. Inside, lamplight slithers along a narrow tunnel that smells of stored barley and overworked sandals. A right turn. A left. Then up a cramped stairwell where bronze rivets glint like molten constellations, and you surface behind a swaying reed curtain in Sparta's most secret nerve center, the Bronze House. Council chamber of the 5 Ephors, the place lives. Up to its name. Every wall panel is sheathed in hammered bronze sheets, so polished you could check whether the ivy in your hair still leans at that rebellious angle. Oil lamps hang from chains, their flames mirrored 1,000 times until the room looks aflame, without actually burning. Sitting in a semicircle are the Ephors' gray beards all, cloaks the color of storm clouds, brows folded like origami scowls. They're deep in debate, voices ricocheting off metal so crisply you don't need to press an ear to the curtain. Gentlemen, one in tones. Hospitality is sacred, but so is equilibrium. He slops a wax tablet bearing the list names. Rations may be the inventory of fragile amphorae rumored to explode at the faintest flute trill. Mainstream historical facts slides into your mental notebook. These Ephors, elected yearly, wielded power to find kings, cancel adoptions, even depose monarchs for misconduct. Tonight their glares could outvote 2 divine bloodlines, and a leopard print cloak combined. Another Ephor rattles. An iron bar Spartan currency, purposely unsexy to discourage hoarding, and growls. Every moment spent drunk is a moment the phalanx forgets which side faces Persia. Joke number 1 blooms uninvited. You picture a row of hoplites rotating 180 in perfect unison because someone shouted, "Spin the bottle." You smother the snort by biting your knuckle. The eldest member, whose beard is white as fresh Pythos clay, raises a trembling finger. "Remember our last symposium," he says. "Black broth, barley, hymns to Apollo orderly, respectable. What need have we for ivy crowns that leave stained foreheads and scandal in the archives?" A younger Ephor fixes him with pupils like pinholds and counters. Orderly, yes, but half the youths snuck off afterward to trade riddles with Argive merchants. Total sobriety breeds secret thirst. His remark lands like a dropped shield. You can almost feel the metallic clang in your sternum, quirky tidbit materializes as if summoned. Tradition holds that during especially tense votes, Ephorus wore tiny pig bladder earplugs soaked in vinegar to muffle outside influence supposedly. The harsh scent kept judgment sharp and gossip dull. You notice one counselor discreetly inserting something pinkish into his ear. Evidently, the custom survives. Debate escalates. He brings maenads, someone whispers, horrified. They dance unarmed yet disarm whole cities. He brings satyrs, another hisses. Goat-hooved, goat-hearted, goat-mannered. The last adjective earns a scattered chuckle. Even here sarcasm finds oxygen. Joke number 2 skids onto your mental stage. If goat manners are such a menace, perhaps Sparta should issue every citizen a salt-lick shield for peaceful deterrence. You bite down harder. Your knuckle may sue for damages. The eldest raps a bronze. Rod against the floor. A vote, he declares. Admission of the god to tomorrow night's symposium, yay or nay. 5 tablets are passed, stylus tips scratching like mice in a granary. You hold breath. Somewhere outside, a drumbeat syncs with your pulse, dum-dum reminding you the revelers still hum beyond the walls. Tablets return. 3 nays, 1 abstain, 1 yay. Gasps flutter. Even your hoplite escort shifts behind the curtain. Abstention is rare. A split decision rarer still. Historians still argue whether Ephorus ever stalemated this deeply, or if later playwrights embellished. Tensions to spice tragedies. Tonight you're watching footnotes carve themselves in real time. The lone Ye speaks Epimenes, younger than his beard suggests, rumored to have once traveled to Delphi and come back smiling. Discipline. Without release implodes, he warns. If you jail laughter, it digs tunnels. His stylus taps the tablet edge in gentle staccato. Let the god in for one sanctioned night. We set terms. Limited wine, no weapons. Music ends at sunrise. We prove strength by bending, not by shattering. The abstainer Archidamos clears his throat. I abstained, he rumbles, because the omens are muddy. He gestures to a bronze dish holding 2 sheep livers, each dark and glistening like forbidden's jams. Quirky tidbit number 2. Spartan haruspices sometimes sprinkled crushed oregano over entrails. If the herb stuck, the omen was sticky binding. Tonight, half the leaves hold, half fall. Sticky as politics. Captain Anaxandrides storms in unannounced, helmet plume quivering. Gate stands, he reports, voice ragged, but rumors. Batter our men harder than arrows. They fear amphora shrapnel, my lords. He visibly winces at the absurdity of his own sentence, which triggers joke number 3 inside your head. Imagine Spartan shield manuals updating their threatless Persians. Athenians and drunken pottery. Epimenes rises, cloak swirling, and addresses the captain. If fear already walks the wall, why not invite its master and negotiate? A thunderous silence follows, bronze panels reflecting 5 stern faces multiplied into a chorus of hesitation. The eldest exhales. We must consult Retra, he says, referencing the unwritten Lycurgan constitution delivered, legend claims, by Apollo himself. Yet even he seems unsure which clause covers divine party crashing. A herald is summoned to retrieve the kings, but both rulers are deployed on training inspections beyond Tagetis tonight. The Ephors glance at each other, rare moment when executive, legislative, and mythic powers misalign like bad stars on a sailor's chart. Epimenes seizes advantage. Authority defaults to us, he notes, quoting precedent. We can permit a conditional entry. Let the gods speak within the agora before the final vote at dawn. Murmurs spiral. You sense the nay voters recalculating? Reputational risk. Deny Dionysus, risk cracked pottery and cracked morale. Accept him conditionally, risk smudging Sparta's spotless record of restraint. The bronze walls trap heat from so many anxious breaths. Sweat beads on foreheads, drips to cloaks, evaporates with tiny sighs. Outside, the drums shift to a patient. Hypnotic rumble, as if Dionysus knows a bureaucratic plot twist is in motion. Finally, the eldest slumps, beard brushing parchment. Conditional entry, he concedes. But no wine within the walls, water only. Epimene smiles thinly. Water poured from what vessel, my lord? No answer. Everyone knows wine amphorae vastly outnumber water jars along the Agra stalls. A silent acknowledgement hangs. Loophole discovered. Decision etched. Wax tablet stamped. The captain receives orders. Unlock the gate, but escort the procession straight to the Agra under heavy guard. No singing past midnight. No ivy on public statues. No satyrs near the women's quarters. Captain salutes, pivots, cloak snapping like a sail catching wind. You back away behind the curtain, heart ricocheting. The gate will open. Sparta has blinked. History pivots not on spears tonight, but on a single abstention and a sly loophole about vessels. You and your hoplite guide dart down the stairwell, footsteps echoing bronze like distant cymbals, racing to spread word before the drums reach. Crescendo dot in the corridor, you nearly collide with kitchen slaves lugging fresh cauldrons of black broth toward the mess hall. They nod, oblivious to seismic politics unfolding overhead. You almost blurt the news, then spare them. Let them discover in their own good time. That broth may soon share shelf space with something more spirited dot as you burst into the chill night. The scent of vines and torch smoke mingles on the breeze, an aromatic handshake between two worlds that refuse to remain strangers. The latch is being lifted. You head for the gate, ready to witness the moment rumor tricks stone into turning its own key. The gate's groan still echoes when you veer off the main swell of revelers, ducking down a side alley that smells like wet limestone and unspoken guilt. You haven't forgotten the F4's laundry list of no ivy on public statues, so naturally your next move is to smuggle ivy straight into the most Spartan of sanctuaries, the shrine of Artemis Orthia. What could go wrong? The alley deadens. At a low wall draped in shadow, you boost yourself up, land like a whisper on the far side, and immediately regret the stealth flourish olive branches jab your ribs with the politeness of unpaid tax collectors. Joke number 1 flits out under your breath. If Spartans mastered anything, it's designing shrubbery that enforces curfew. Past the grove, the moonlit courtyard of Orpheus' temple gleams flat white paving stones inset with dark river pebbles that form a running hair mosaic. By daylight, the place hosts harsh whipping rites for Goge boys competing to snatch cheese from the goddess's altar. At night, it lies silent, holding its breath in anticipation of dawn pain. Mainstream historical fact steps beside you. The Dionysus, those ritual floggings, were believed to harden youths and honor Artemis, whose epithet Orthia means upright, a nod to resilience. You shiver, half from chill, half imagining skin welted in the goddess's name. Tonight the courtyard's empty, except for a thin veil of incense smoke seeping from the inner sanctuary. You pad across the stones, ivy crown now stuffed inside. Your cloak like contraband. A bronze door panel stands ajar odd, because Spartans lock everything tighter than their emotional range. You slip in and find yourself in a chamber of cedar pillars. Bronze oil lamps on wall hooks cast amber halos, revealing votive offerings, spears snapped in mock combat, carved wooden stags, and who left this? A delicate terracotta mask of Dionysus, lips painted smile red. The sight is equal parts daring and hilarious. Someone has already begun mixing pantheons while the F4s were busy ringing their wax tablets. Quirky tidbit. Local legend says Orthia sometimes borrowed Dionysus's thyrsus for spring festivals, trading him her bow for a single night. Archers swore their arrows flew truer the next morning, proving even gods appreciate a tool swap. Step deeper, footsteps followed by reed mats. At the altar, two priestesses kneel facing each other, sharing a silent tug-of-war with their own nerves. One's robe bears ivy embroidery so subtle it could pass for laurel. The other wears the plainest wool imaginable, decorated only by a frown. Ivy robe cradles a shallow dish of wine. Plain wool clutches a jug of spring water, the Ephor's mandated beverage. They're clearly reenacting the broader city debate. In portable table for two format, historians still argue whether women in Sparta held greater religious leverage, precisely because males were so busy soldiering that the civic soul subtly defaulted to priestesses. Watching these two, you suspect the answer tilts toward yes, and they know it. Neither has noticed you yet. You press behind a cedar pillar and eavesdrop. Ivy robe whispers, Artemis guards the threshold, but Dionysus guards the doorway. Of the heart, refuse him, and what songs will comfort the boys after the lash? Plain wool hisses back, songs cannot mend virtue. Water is pure, wine is permission to forget purity. Her voice cracks, indicating she's tasted permission before and misses it. Joke number 2 pings inside your skull, maybe purity shed. Start an apprenticeship program to learn flexibility. A soft clink. Ivy robe has set the wine dish on the altar slab. She unwraps a braid of fresh ivy from her wrist, draping it across Artemis's bronze toe. The statue of the goddess, tall and stern, gazes forward as though scanning for rule breakers. Yet the addition of leafy green around her ankle looks strangely fitting, as if Artemis herself yearns for a weekend off from supervising cheese thieves. You slip the ivy crown from your cloak, inch closer, and carefully loop it over one cedar pillar, letting it dangle like a secret promise. The air thickens, warm, vibrating, faint hum of distant drums sneaking through roof vents. Plain wool exhales. Sharply, noticing the crown. We are not alone, she warns. Ivy robe darts a glance, spots you, but instead of calling guards, she tilts her head in invitation. Maybe she reads the desperation for balance in your posture 1 foot loyal to black broth discipline, the other itching for a sip of cosmic mischief. You emerge, palms open, and confess with a half smile. I come bearing rumors and respiratory-grade flute solos. She laughs despite herself. Tension cracks. They usher you forward. Ivy robe asks for a sign that Dionysus's arrival intends. More than chaos. You remember that pomegranate seed miracle on the road? From your pouch, you produce a single seed that you filched before it burrowed. You set it in the wine dish. It twitches, no joke, and sprouts a microstem that coils around the bowl's rim, blossoming a pinpoint purple flower smaller than a flea's festival hat. Even plain wool's jaw loosens. Quirky tidbit number 2 lands, ancient Greek midwives. Sometimes placed sprouting pomegranate seeds near laboring women, believing the burst of life energy eased deliveries. Right now, it delivers a vote swing. Ivy robe bows to Artemis, lifts the wine dish, and pours half into the water jug. Dilution a compromise older than bronze. She murmurs, if wine enters with water, they arrive as friends. Plain wool nods. Dips a finger, tastes, and her shoulders slump in relief, as though the mixture's mild sweetness rewires a circuit long overloaded. They ask whether the Ephors consent. You relay the conditional entry terms: no unwatered wine, no ivy on public statues. Ivy robe smirks at the pillar garland. Private pillars aren't public, she says, and you decide legal loopholes grow faster than vines in this city tonight. They task you with delivering a message to Dionysus. Let his people enter by the shrine first. If Artemis sees order and revelry, the city must follow. You exit through a side portico into the whipping courtyard again, where moonlight now spotlights the hair mosaic. For a flash, you envision tomorrow's Diamastigosis shifting. Instead of whips, perhaps ribbons. Instead of cheese, maybe figs. Soaked in wine. Joke number 3 escapes. Imagine Spartan lads returning from a gorge with wine-stained tunics and claiming it. Advanced camouflage dot as you weave back toward the main thoroughfare, you sense something new underfoot fine threads of ivy sneaking between flagstones. The temple accepted the offering, and the plant is answering in botanical Morse code. Somewhere a nightingale sings, its song syncing uncannily with the parade's distant pipes. The line between military cadence and Bacchic rhythm blurs like wet ink, and you find yourself humming along, bone flute itching to join. Epimenes rises, cloak swirling, and addresses the captain. If fear already walks the wall, why not invite its master and negotiate? A thunderous silence follows, bronze panels reflecting 5 stern faces multiplied into a chorus of hesitation. The eldest exhales. "We must consult Retra," he says, referencing the unwritten Lycurgan constitution delivered, legend claims, by Apollo himself. Yet even he seems unsure which clause covers divine party crashing. A herald is summoned to retrieve the kings, but both rulers are deployed on training inspections beyond Tagetis tonight. The F4s glance at each other, rare moment when executive, legislative, and mythic powers misalign like bad stars on a sailor's chart. Epimenes seizes advantage. "Authority defaults to us," he notes, quoting precedent. "We can permit a conditional entry. Let the gods speak within the agora before the final vote at dawn." Murmurs spiral. You sense the nay voters recalculating. Reputational risk. Deny Dionysus, risk cracked pottery and cracked morale. Accept him conditionally, risk smudging Sparta's spotless record of restraint. The bronze walls trap heat from so many anxious breaths. Sweat beads on foreheads, drips to cloaks, evaporates with tiny sighs. Outside, the drums shift to a patient, hypnotic rumble as if Dionysus knows a bureaucratic plot twist is in motion. Finally, the eldest slumps, beard brushing parchment. Conditional entry, he concedes. But no wine within the walls, water only. Epimenes smiles thinly. "Water poured from what vessel, my lord?" No answer. Everyone knows wine amphorae vastly outnumber water jars along the agora stalls. A silent acknowledgement hangs. Loophole discovered. Decision etched. Wax tablet stamped. The captain receives orders. Unlock the gate, but escort the procession straight to the agora under heavy guard. No singing past midnight. No ivy on public statues. No satyrs near the women's quarters. Captain salutes, pivots, cloak snapping like a sail catching wind. You back away behind the curtain, heart ricocheting. The gate will open. Sparta has blinked. History pivots not on spears tonight, but on a single abstention and a sly loophole about vessels. You and your hoplite guide dart down the stairwell, footsteps echoing bronze like distant cymbals, racing to spread word before the drums reach. Crescendo dot in the corridor, you nearly collide with kitchen slaves lugging fresh cauldrons of black broth toward the mess hall. They nod, oblivious to seismic politics unfolding overhead. You almost blurt the news, then spare them. Let them discover in their own good time. That broth may soon share shelf space with something more spirited dot as you burst into the chill night. The scent of vines and torch smoke mingles on the breeze, an aromatic handshake between two worlds that refuse to remain strangers. The latch is being lifted. You head for the gate, ready to witness the moment rumor tricks stone into turning its own key. The gate's groan still echoes when you veer off the main swell of revelers, ducking down a side alley that smells like wet limestone and unspoken guilt. You haven't forgotten the F4's laundry list of no ivy on public statues, so naturally your next move is to smuggle ivy straight into the most Spartan of sanctuaries, the shrine of Artemis Orthia. What could go wrong? The alley deadens. At a low wall draped in shadow, you boost yourself up, land like a whisper on the far side, and immediately regret the stealth flourish olive branches jab your ribs with the politeness of unpaid tax collectors. Joke number 1 flits out under your breath. If Spartans mastered anything, it's designing shrubbery that enforces curfew. Past the grove, the moonlit courtyard of Orpheus' temple gleams flat, white paving stones inset with dark river pebbles that form a running hair mosaic. By daylight, the place hosts harsh whipping rites for Goge boys competing to snatch cheese from the goddess's altar. At night, it lies silent, holding its breath in anticipation of dawn pain. Mainstream historical fact steps beside you. The Dionysus, those ritual floggings, were believed to harden youths and honor Artemis, whose epithet Orthia means upright, a nod to resilience. You shiver, half from chill, half imagining skin welted in the goddess's name. Tonight the courtyard's empty, except for a thin veil of incense smoke seeping from the inner sanctuary. You pad across the stones, ivy crown now stuffed inside. Your cloak like contraband. A bronze door panel stands ajar odd, because Spartans lock everything tighter than their emotional range. You slip in and find yourself in a chamber of cedar pillars. Bronze oil lamps on wall hooks cast amber halos, revealing votive offerings, spears snapped in mock combat, carved wooden stags, and who left this? A delicate terracotta mask of Dionysus, lips painted smile red. The sight is equal parts daring and hilarious. Someone has already begun mixing pantheons while the F4s were busy ringing their wax tablets. Quirky tidbit. Local legend says Orthia sometimes borrowed Dionysus's thyrsus for spring festivals, trading him her bow for a single night. Archers swore their arrows flew truer the next morning, proving even gods appreciate a tool swap. Step deeper, footsteps followed by reed mats. At the altar, 2 priestesses kneel facing each other, sharing a silent tug-of-war with their own nerves. One's robe bears ivy embroidery so subtle it could pass for laurel. The other wears the plainest wool imaginable, decorated only by a frown. Ivy robe cradles a shallow dish of wine. Plain wool clutches a jug of spring water, the F4's mandated beverage. They're clearly reenacting the broader city debate. In portable table for 2 format. Historians still argue whether women in Sparta held greater religious leverage, precisely because males were so busy soldiering that the civic soul subtly defaulted to priestesses. Watching these two, you suspect the answer tilts toward yes, and they know it. Neither has noticed you yet. You press behind a cedar pillar and eavesdrop. Ivy robe whispers, Artemis guards the threshold, but Dionysus guards the doorway of the heart. Refuse him, and what songs will comfort the boys after the lash? Plain wool hisses back. Songs cannot mend virtue. Water is pure. Wine is permission to forget purity. Her voice cracks, indicating she's tasted permission before and misses it. Joke number 2 pings inside your skull. Maybe purity shed. Start an apprenticeship program to learn flexibility. A soft clink. Ivy robe has set the wine dish on the altar slab. She unwraps a braid of fresh ivy from her wrist, draping it across Artemis's bronze toe. The statue of the goddess, tall and stern, gazes forward as though scanning for rule breakers. Yet the addition of leafy green around her ankle looks strangely fitting, as if Artemis herself yearns for a weekend off from supervising cheese thieves. You slip the ivy crown from your cloak, inch closer, and carefully loop it over one cedar pillar, letting it dangle like a secret promise. The air thickens, warm, vibrating, faint hum of distant drums sneaking through roof vents. Plain wool exhales. Sharply, noticing the crown. We are not alone, she warns. Ivy robe darts a glance, spots you, but instead of calling guards, she tilts her head in invitation. Maybe she reads the desperation for balance in your posture 1 foot loyal to black broth discipline, the other itching for a sip of cosmic mischief. You emerge, palms open, and confess with a half smile. I come bearing rumors and respiratory-grade flute solos. She laughs despite herself. Tension cracks. They usher you forward. Ivy Robe asks for a sign that Dionysus's arrival intends. More than chaos. You remember that pomegranate seed miracle on the road? From your pouch, you produce a single seed that you filched before it burrowed. You set it in the wine dish. It twitches, no joke, and sprouts a microstem that coils around the bowl's rim, blossoming a pinpoint purple flower smaller than a flea's festival hat. Even plain wool's jaw loosens. Quirky tidbit number 2 lands, ancient Greek midwives. Sometimes placed sprouting pomegranate seeds near laboring women, believing the burst of life energy eased deliveries. Right now, it delivers a vote swing. Ivy Robe bows to Artemis, lifts the wine dish, and pours half into the water jug. Dilution a compromise older than bronze. She murmurs, if wine enters with water, they arrive as friends. Plain wool nods. Dips a finger, tastes, and her shoulders slump in relief, as though the mixture's mild sweetness rewires a circuit long overloaded. They ask whether the F4s consent. You relay the conditional entry terms: no unwatered wine, no ivy on public statues. Ivy Robe smirks at the pillar garland. Private pillars aren't public, she says, and you decide legal loopholes grow faster than vines in this city tonight. They task you with delivering a message to Dionysus. Let his people enter by the shrine first. If Artemis sees order and revelry, the city must follow. You exit through a side portico into the whipping courtyard again, where moonlight now spotlights the hair mosaic. For a flash, you envision tomorrow's diamastigosis shifting. Instead of whips, perhaps ribbons. Instead of cheese, maybe figs. Soaked in wine. Joke number 3 escapes. Imagine Spartan lads returning from a goge with wine-stained tunics and claiming it. S-advance camouflage dot as you weave back toward the main thoroughfare. You sense something new underfoot fine threads of ivy sneaking between flagstones. The temple accepted the offering, and the plant is answering in botanical Morse code. Somewhere a nightingale sings, its song syncing uncannily with the parade's distant pipes. The line between military cadence and Bacchic rhythm blurs like wet ink, and you find yourself humming along, bone flute itching to join. Historians will later bicker whether Spartan reluctance tonight was principled piety or fear wrapped in protocol. Whatever their conclusion, you just witnessed a paradox. A polite refusal that nonetheless opened half a door, enough for a barefoot god in leopard print to slide one joyous paw inside. The city is still saying no, but its hinges whisper maybe. Torchlight flickers ahead, guiding you toward Artemis's courtyard, where Ivy already rehearses its lines. The spearmen escort, but their spearheads point down subconscious. Surrender. Dionysus hums, a melody rich with fermented promises. And you, ambassador of compromise, walk that thin seam between no and yes. Hearing it creak wider with every footstep that the return march from Artemis's courtyard funnels you straight into the same bare stone mess hall where the night began, but the energy has mutated. Vines now droop discreetly from ceiling beams like shy acrobats testing the rigging, while a quartet of priestesses ladles out black broth with the solemnity of judges delivering verdicts. You can almost hear Lycurgus's ghost performing a surprise kitchen inspection, clipboard in spectral hand. Joke number 1 whispers across your neurons. If the lawgiver ever materializes tonight, he'll probably slap a fund deficit surcharge on every smile. Benches groan as soldiers reclaim their seats, though this time they keep spears propped. Upright, ceremonial fence posts, reminding everyone the party is still on probation. Dionysus, having fulfilled the shrine detour, enters unannounced from a side door. Instead of leopard skin, he now sports a plain wool himation dyed the same wine-dark sea Homer loved, perhaps to telegraph respect, but not capitulation. The hem glitters faintly with crushed grape skins, a sartorial wink, Captain Alexandrides. Strides beside him, face fixed in what might be called a diplomatic grimace. 2 amphorae stamped with the city sigil arrive, one brimming with spring water, the other suspiciously stoppered. A steward begins pouring water into wooden cups for the men. Dionysus raises an eyebrow so arched it could vault a pole vaulter. He gestures, and from the doorway a satyr wheels in a modest crater of diluted wine. 3-to-1 ratio, exactly the loophole the F4s wrote without admitting it. A collective throat-clear ripples through the hall. The steward hesitates, ladle poised, above the cup like a comet considering impact. Mainstream historical fact strolls into your mind. Greek symposium etiquette usually demanded at least a splash of wine be mixed with water to disinfect and flavor. But Spartans proudly inverted the rule: wine only on festivals, water forever otherwise. Historians still argue whether this abstinence sharpened their war edge or merely served as propaganda for outsiders. Accounts from visiting ambassadors clash harder than hoplite shields on drill day. The polemarch from Section 2 bangs his fist. For quiet, order of service, he barks. First course, water and barley bread. Second course, black broth. Third course, a dramatic pause worthy of Attic theater discussion. The word drops like a dull spear. Discussion in Sparta is usually code for lecture. Dionysus inclines his head, accepts a simple cup of water, and drinks. No miracles, no vines bursting, a hall exhales. You sip your own water and try to taste excitement. Instead, you get faint mineral notes and memories of the vine-scented road. Joke number 2 escapes. If enthusiasm were measured in parts per million, this drink would legally qualify as inert. Bread arrives, dense as ever. Yet tonight, someone has sprinkled sesame luxury by Spartan standards. A murmured explanation rustles down the benches. The seeds were confiscated from an earlier Athenian import shipment and have been aging in storage. You bite and discover the tiniest pop of flavor, which feels borderline illegal, like smuggling fireworks inside a tax return. Quirky tidbit: Plutarch records that visiting foreigners occasionally bribed cooks with honey cakes to rescue them from Spartan cuisine, only to be fined for corrupting local austerity. You wonder how many drachmas tonight's sesame seeds will cost whoever okayed them. Black broth follows, steam curling into question marks. You spoon it with renewed dread, less for the taste, more for the symbolic whiplash. Here sits the culinary. Anthem to severity, served mere arm lengths from a god who could turn the cauldron into sangria with a blink. Instead, Dionysus quietly accepts his portion. He blows across the surface and inhales the iron tang. A faint smile flickers, the kind parents flash when tasting their kid's first disastrous attempt at cooking. He sips, his eyelids flutter, not in disgust but nostalgia. He addresses the hall. Discipline in a cup, I honor it. Conversation stirs. The satyr musician nearest you hazards a question to his Spartan neighbor. Does endurance taste better when shared? The soldier, not missing a beat, replies, endurance is like a shield useless alone. The pun almost passes for philosophy. Historians still argue whether Spartan messes doubled as think tanks that refine laconic wit, or whether later writers romanticize mundane supper grunts into quotable wisdom. Tonight leans toward the former. These men may feast on nothing, but they choose subtext like seasoned scholars and then fate faceplants into theater. A junior helot attendant, surely rattled by the room's cosmic tension, trips on a bench leg. His wooden pitcher arcs upward, ejecting a dark ribbon of diluted wine hidden inside smuggled treat for officers, perhaps. The liquid sails in slow motion, glistening under torchlight, then splashes square onto the white wool cloak of an F4 who has just entered to observe. The hall gasps so hard the torches almost blow out. Wine on a cloak. In Sparta, that's practically a felony with fabric evidence. The F4's eyes widen, nostrils flare. He looks as though he's contemplating whether ripping space-time is within his jurisdiction. Joke number 3 darts through your slackened jaw. This is the Greek edition of Who Spilled Red Slurpee on Mom's New Sofa? Only the sofa owns swords. Dionysus rises before anyone else can detonate. He strides to the F4, takes a corner of his own himation, and gently dabs the stain. As he works, the wine mark begins to spread into a perfect ivy leaf silhouette, no? Bigger than a drachma, but unmistakable. Murmurs ripple, miracle or trick? The F4's outrage stalls, confusion entering stage right. Dionysus whispers so only the first 2 rows hear, even accidents bloom. Mainstream fact number 2 sips through. Many Greek city-states believed divine will could manifest in spontaneous patterns, oil slicks, smoke shapes, bird entrails. An ivy leaf stain on an F4's cloak probably qualifies. Historians will later squint at records, trying to decide if someone embroidered this anecdote for drama. Historians still argue whether the so-called ivy stain miracle truly occurred or symbolized broader cultural seepage. A dusty monograph will declare, 2 centuries hence. For now, the F4 blinks, stunned into silence. Captain Anaxandrides sees an opening. He signals the steward to pour a thimble of the sanctioned diluted wine into every cup. For cleansing, he rationalizes. You expect Spartans to protest. Instead, they comply, unspoken math clicking. If a god solves accidents with symbols, maybe hedging bets is prudent. The steward ladles carefully, and a perfumed hush settles. Cups rise. You sip water down to near nothing, but the hint of grape whispers like forbidden's gossip on your tongue. A soldier across the table smacks his lips, then mutters, tastes like compromise. His comrade replies, compromise. Tastes better than punishment duty. Laughter, brief but genuine, flits overhead before discipline shoos it back under the bench. Dionysus sits, black broth forgotten. He cradles his cup, swirls the diluted liquid, and says loud enough for the back row, pleasure doesn't drown discipline. It teaches her to swim. The aphorism lands softly, sinking into Spartan minds like seeds, wondering if the soil is finally soft enough. Some faces harden, others soften, but no one speaks denial. Bread trays circulate again. The sesame flavor feels brighter, perhaps emboldened by the wine's cameo. You realize the feast, once flavorless by design, now wobbles on a new axis. Still Spartan, lowercase, yet spiked with irrepressible spark. Quirky tidbit 2 floats by. Certain philosophers claimed that the tongue has memory independent of the brain. A single sip can resurrect entire histories. Tonight, memory tastes like budding ivy. Symbols remain silent, pipes tucked away per F4 order. Yet conversations unfurl, laced with curiosity rather than suspicion. A veteran asks a Maenad about vine cultivation on rocky slopes. She answers in practical tips, nothing scandalous. 2 satyrs debate barley yields with farmers. The polemarch himself requests a watered wine refill for inspection. The god's grin widens by millimeters. Somewhere near the hearth, a bowl of broth accidentally receives a splash of wine. No one panics this time. Instead, the nearby soldier tastes the mixture and declares it almost tolerable. He suggests calling it rouge broth. You imagine future mess halls offering novelty menus, black, rouge, or don't ask. The mental image garners your private giggle dot as torches gutter low. You sense the room's pulse slowing to a steady cadence piece. Sparta hasn't surrendered. It's experimenting, measuring each drop of color against centuries of grayscale habit. Whether dawn will harden or nurture this experiment remains unknown, but right now, the flavorless feast has acquired a note of possibility subtle, but impossible to mistaste. The torches dim to thumb-sized embers, and in that amber hush you sense a counter-offensive brewing, not from hoplites but from parchment. A contingent of lanky Spartan youths files into the hall, solace whispering over stone. They carry nothing but tablets and the brittle self-importance of kids reciting rules they haven't yet broken. Tonight's agenda: a midnight reading of Lycurgus's Edicts, because nothing says party like statutory law performed as slam poetry. Joke number 1 perks up inside your skull. Somewhere in Tartarus, Sisyphus pauses mid-boulder to applaud the creativity of using legislation as a lullaby. The lads arrange themselves in a semicircle, faces flickering gold. Their choral leader, a boy barely old enough to grow a proper insult, raises a stylus like a baton. In unison they chant, eat to live, not live to eat, train at dawn, patrol at dusk. Wealth hides in deeds, not in coin. The syllables strike the air like pebbles. On a shield, crisp and flinty, mainstream historical fact struts on stage. Lycurgan law required communal meals, equal land allotments, and iron currency to choke off greed. Even kings swallowed the same gritty barley bread as foot soldiers. Across the room, Dionysus reclines. Against a pillar, expression half amusement, half mathematician plotting an equation of mischief. You notice faint flute notes wafting from the courtyard, stealthy as moth wings. Satyrs outside are testing volume thresholds, seeing how soft a melody can be before discipline hears it. Each phrase spirals into the rafters, tangling with the legal recitations. The result sounds like an odd duet. Eat to live, pit pit pit, dance to breathe. You almost expect the walls to request earplugs again. One youth unfurls a fresh tablet and begins the harsher verses. Punishments for cowardice, rules for hair length, the ban on gold or silver furnishings. He reads with the grave diction of someone announcing a meteor strike. Midway, Amina gently clears her throat, lifts a watered wine cup, and toasts the boy's oratory. He falters, cheeks pink, but soldiers murmur approval. Respect is respect, even from the so-called enemy. Joke number 2 sneaks out of you. If nuclear disarmament ever needs a model, consider the uneasy detente between adolescent pride and a well-timed compliment. Dionysus rises, strolls behind the youth chorus, and releases a soft trill on a reed. Pipe he's borrowed from somewhere, maybe your belt, you can't even tell. The note is so low it surfaces more as vibration than sound, a cat purring beneath the floorboards. The boys hesitate. Their next line, spare words, hoard valor, arrives 1 beat late. A soldier coughs to cover the bauble. You feel tension rippling, a tug-of-war between memorized doctrine and improvised delight. Quirky tidbit slips in wearing ivy socks. Some antiquarians claim that young Spartans memorized statutes by reciting them to the rhythm of hammer strikes. In the smithy, believing the clang imprinted law into muscles. Tonight, the hammers are flutes, and the forge is a mess hall scented faintly of sesame rebellion. The choral leader regains footing, voices rising into a final credo. Fear dishonor, more than death. As echoes fade, Dionysus applauds, not mocking, but measured, like a teacher acknowledging solid technique while planning the next lesson. He tilts his head and addresses the boys. Honorable fear is a sturdy raft, but who steers when the river bends? The lads look to elders for a cue, but the elders look back, just as lost. Historians still argue whether Spartan education truly stamped out individual inquiry or merely postponed it until campaigns demanded creative maneuvering. Tonight, curiosity glints in every teenage eye like a smuggled coin. Anaxandride steps forward to reassert momentum. We think the youth brigade, he intones. Formal bows exchanged, tablets collected, yet the energy won't settle. The flutes outside have swelled into a gentle chorus, weaving through windows. The captain orders shutters closed. They comply, but music sneaks through slats, proving sound is less obedient than soldiers. Dionysus nods to a satyr at the threshold. The satyr produces a bundle of reed stems capped with beeswax. He twirls. Two hands the rest to the youths, an invitation disguised as a souvenir. Alexandrite's bristles, but policy doesn't forbid harmless crafts, so he permits it. Within moments, the boys discover they're clutching instant panpipes. One ventures. A note squeaky, off-key, but met with appreciative snaps from the god. The choral leader suppresses a grin, tests a scale, and the group spontaneously coordinates, layering tentative harmonies over the receding legal echo. You witness doctrine converting to duet as naturally as ice softening in spring. Joke number 3 pops. You mutter that in 10 years, these lads will invent the world's first legal document musical, complete with dancing footnotes. A nearby Maenad cackles, nearly spilling her cup. The elders huddle, whispering damage assessments. Allowing boys to toot pipes inside city walls skirts the edges of no revel inside legislation. Epimines the lone yea, Ephor holds. Up a calming palm, practice breeds mastery, he says. Even of breath. Clever spin, by framing flute play as lung training, he sells indulgence as fitness. Spartan logic nods along, inhaling the loophole like warm steam. Meanwhile, Dionysus circles back to his pillar, producing a small rolled parchment. When he unfurls it against torchlight, you see sketches vine patterns overlaying city streets, each intersection marked by stylized amphora icons. Mischief blueprint? He traces a route with fingertip, from the mess hall to the agra fountains, then branching into residential lanes. He's mapping where sound travels, you realize an acoustic lattice. If water and diluted wine are all that's allowed, he'll simply flood the town with music instead of drink. Mainstream fact number 2 glides in. Many ancient Greek festivals employed processional hymns, paeans, to sanctify streets before libations began. Sonic cleansing prepared urban arteries for spiritual flow. Dionysus seems poised to resurrect the custom, minus any permit forms. A veteran soldier leans your way, whispering his concern. Music dulls vigilance. You counter softly, or sharpens timing. Marching drills rely on rhythm. He chews that thought like hardened barley, then nods, surprised by agreement. The boundary between indulgence and utility shrinks another inch. Outside, pipes crescendo. Ivy leaves rustle where there should be none, brushing rafters with green sighs. The youths test their new instruments against the external chorus, creating call and response patterns that chase each other across beams. Breadcrumbs jitter on tables. Some soldiers tap spear halves like makeshift drums, not even realizing they're participating. Discipline hasn't been abandoned. It's been repurposed cadence swapped from march to music. Quirky tidbit 2 twirls by. Archaeologists once found a tiny bronze flute mouthpiece embedded in a Spartan training field, evidence that at least some drills involved musical cues. Historians dismissed it as foreign contamination. You suspect it was rehearsal for tonight? Finally, Dionysus steps into the center aisle and raises both hands. Instantly, every pipe falls silent. The hall holds its breath, an organism poised. Between heartbeat and hiccup, he speaks. Shadow of Lycurgus, meet the echo of Orpheus. One teaches stance, the other teaches sway. Sparta, can you do both without breaking? The question drifts upward, finds no cobweb to cling to, descends unanswered into everyone's. Cupped at the polemark calls for lamps to be trimmed lower rest hour approaches. Yet he does not confiscate the pipes. Boys tuck them into belts like badges won in an unplanned contest. Soldiers stack shields, but leave a deliberate gap between row space enough for sound to pass through. You feel the entire room recalibrating, as if the lawgiver's shadow now shares floor space with a fresh silhouette, that of a god who speaks in flute breath. On cue, a final legal line is recited almost as benediction. Let the city stand firm. A youth adds, sotto voce, and let the song keep it awake. No reprimand follows. The elders pretend not to hear, but the corners of Epimenes' lips tilt upward. You sip the last of diluted wine and notice. Its earlier hush has warmed into a shy buzz. Not drunkenness, call it resonance. The sort of hush that settles after a difficult chord resolves. Tomorrow may bring stricter verdicts, but tonight the lawgiver's shadow lengthens just enough for mischief to slip beneath, trailing notes. That sounds suspiciously like hope.sleep refuses to settle, so you slip outside while most of the hall's torches sputter into embryo resignation. The night carries that hush unique to moments when a city tries pretending nothing unusual just happened, like a child shutting eyes to dodge hide-and-seek detection. Laurel-lined porticos march in military silence, yet you swear the columns are leaning closer than before, eavesdropping on their own facades. Joke number 1 pops. If Doric capitals had ears, they'd be begging for earplugs against tomorrow's gossip tsunami. You head toward the inner wall that rings Sparta's civic core. Moonlight slicks the blocks with pewter, and for a heartbeat, everything looks exactly as Lycurgus would have wanted: immaculate, unyielding, about as welcoming as an itemized tax scroll. Then you notice it, a single ivy tendril, thin as fishing line, creeping from a mortar seam halfway up the stone. You blink once, twice. The tendril lengthens in real time, unfurling a glossy leaf the size of a hoplite's thumbnail. It jitters, sniffs the air, and anchors itself a finger breadth higher. Another vine emerges farther down, then another, until the whole wall resembles parchment warming under invisible ink, green signatures writing themselves across gray stone. You are the only audience, but not for long. A patrol rounds the corner, spears shouldered. They halt, jaws unhinged. One soldier rubs eyes as though sand crawled in. The corporal mutters an oath referencing Donkey Hooves PG-13, of course, and moves to slash the closest vine. The moment metal tip touches leaf, the entire tendril recoils, zipping upward like a startled eel. The corporal stumbles backward. You manage joke number 2 under your breath. Congratulations, sir. You just got outmaneuvered by salad. Mainstream. Historical fact strolls by. Hands in pockets. The Greeks called ivy kissos and associated its evergreen hardiness with Dionysus. Symposium drinkers often wore ivy wreaths because they believed the plant cooled the head and warded off intoxication. Tonight, it appears ivy also wards off Spartan swords, or at least snubs them with botanical sass. The corporal regroups, orders his men to stand guard rather than attack. Wise move. The vines now braid themselves into delicate latticework, neither rushing nor retreating, simply colonizing surface like a patient siege. You remember earlier rumors of amphorae bursting when cities denied the god? Perhaps Sparta's amphorae were spared by the diluted wine loophole, leaving the walls to collect interest instead. Historians still argue whether such vegetal miracles were added by later storytellers to dramatize religious clashes. Observing leaf after leaf unfold, you're prepared to testify for Team Miracle. A shadow detaches from a nearby alcove. Dionysus himself, cloak traded again, this time for a plain linen chiton cinched with ivy rope. He steps lightly barefoot on cold flagstone and rests a palm against the wall. Leaves unfurl faster where his skin meets stone. He doesn't gloat. He merely hums a scale that sounds suspiciously like the flute motif the youths practiced. The melody slides into mortar cracks and seeds them with rhythm. A private concert for limestone. The corporal salutes, uneasy. Lord the Ephors, sleep. Dionysus finishes, voice as soft as spilled wine. Let them. His gaze never leaves the vines, which now crest the parapet and cascade inward like green waterfalls. Yet the growth is selective. No tendril assaults timber roofs, no leaf suffocates. Arrow loops. It looks decorative, not destructive, quiet botanical revenge instead of riotous overgrowth. Quirky tidbit tiptoes in. Certain vine species respond to minute electrical charges. Researchers in the 21st century, your century, will prove. Plants can detect bioelectric fields. Seems the god's aura counts as a power outlet. You clear your throat gently. Is this permanent? He smiles sideways. A reminder. Walls remember better than men. He taps stone once, and the ivy halts mid-curl, holding position like soldiers frozen in parade rest. From the city side of the wall, a sleepy shout. Fire. Another shout. No leaves. Windows shutter open, silhouettes crane necks. Gasps flutter down lanes. Within minutes, the wall is ringed by torches, but the light only glamorizes the transformation, rendering every leaf a fleck of emerald glass. Children, the ones still awake, point and squeal. Adults mutter calculations. How many man-hours to scrape vines? How much plaster to reseal mortar? Yet no one lifts a tool. The spectacle straddles awe and property damage report, defying bureaucratic. Flowcharts. Captain Alexandrides arrives, hair unhelmeted, cloak thrown over sleek garb. He studies the verdant lattice, then approaches Dionysus, fists unclenching. You promised no chaos. The god answers, chaos. Merely decoration, Sparta lacked shade. Joke number 3 sneaks from your lips, in conversation starters. Apparently, the captain darts you a withering glance that somehow carries appreciation. Even he knows tomorrow's breakfast chatter is pre-written. A hush settles. You notice the distinct absence of flute or drum. Ivy sways in night breeze, making its own percussion leaves brushing stone like soft sandpaper. The corporal, still wide-eyed, asks, "Shall we remove it at dawn?" Dionysus shakes his head gently. Pull 1 leaf, 3 grow. Accept the gift. Prune later if you must. The captain crosses arms, weighing the impracticality of round-the-clock pruning patrols versus the optics of hacking down a god's handiwork. Optics win. He bows fractionally and assigns no pruning. Mainstream fact number 2 takes a bow. Ancient city walls often hosted volunteer florifig. Caper, ivy whose roots gradually pried apart masonry, prompting regular maintenance. Sparta will now face that horticultural headache sooner than scheduled. Courtesy of Divine Express shipping. The crowd thins as curiosity surrenders to drowsiness. You linger with the captain, both of you pretending not to share the same bewildered goosebumps. He breaks silence. We train to breach enemy walls. Never imagine defending ours from plants. You nod, imagining tomorrow's drill orders. Spear thrust, shield block, pruning shears wield. Dionysus retreats toward the Agra, humming. As his silhouette fades, the vines relax, leaves turning upward like sleepers adjusting pillows. You and the captain walk back toward the mess hall. Ivy now traces half the colonnades, little green filigrees that look uncannily festive against grim architecture. Somewhere far off, a rooster mistakes the city's new jewelry for sunrise and crows prematurely. Before parting, the captain mutters, "If the F-words demand explanation, I'll cite your loophole." You grin, recalling black broth, sesame seeds, and flute apprenticeships. Loopholes, you correct. Plural. He almost smiles. Almost, then pivots into barrack shadows, leaving you beneath a wall that has grown a midnight garden. The air smells of sap and wet stone fresher than any Spartan deodorant scheme. You breathe deep, feel eyelids heavy, yet mind bright, as though every leaf now photosynthesizes stray rumors into oxygen. Above, Orion tilts his jeweled belt, studying ivy art from celestial nosebleed seats. You salute the constellation, remembering earlier planked etchings of labyrinths to trap nightmares. Tonight, nightmares might find ivy nets waiting too. Historians will squabble over footnotes, but you'll recall the sound of leaves unfurling like soft applause, the city exhaling, and a god painting without pigment. Just patience. Sleep nibbles the edges of your thoughts. Time to follow its tug back toward benches or any nook not yet claimed by creeping green. The ivy rustle follows like lullaby static, promising shade at dawn and a few raised F4 eyebrows to spice the morning docket. Until then, the wall stands still Spartan, yet softly bedecked proof that discipline can wear vine jewelry without. Crumbling, at least overnight, you wake to a racket of coughs ricocheting along barracks corridors, sharp as pebbles flung at bronze. Dawn's first light squeezes through shutter slats, revealing hoplites doubled over beside bunks, shields propped like worried siblings. The ivy you admired a few hours ago nods innocently outside the windows, leaves gleaming with dew yet. Every sneeze seems to accuse them of biological sabotage. Joke number 1 flickers. Someone should patent Spartan Sudafed now with added discipline, because you've never seen men gargle oath words with such phlegmatic gusto. Captain Alexandride stomps down the aisle, cloak barely fastened, issuing orders between rasping hacks of his own. Water boil it, no wine till we know what cursed us. You note the irony. The city finally sampled diluted grape, now wakes. Up convinced it drank pestilence. Mainstream historical fact ambles up. Ancient Greeks often traced outbreaks to ritual offenses. Athens blamed an unpurified Delian altar for its 430 BCE plague, so Sparta pinning sniffles on a slighted god. Fits the cultural playbook. Outside, the agora bristles with gossip vendors. Meanettes from the entourage hand out sprigs of pennyroyal deemed medicinal. Citizens accept, then eye the donors like walking petri dishes. Historians still argue whether sudden epidemics in mythic accounts were exaggerated morality tales or garbled memories of real pathogens. A scholar voice lectures in your skull while you dodge a flying wad of used linen. Either way, narrative germ plus divine insult equals perfect blame storm. You trail the captain to the infirmary, a stone annex normally reserved for training injuries. Now pallets line walls 3 deep, each occupied by a soldier audibly auditioning for a tragic chorus of consumptive goats. A healer girl presses reed thermometers under tongues. The reeds emerge crimson-striped from chewed stress rather than blood. Quirky tidbit. Spartans believed biting certain reeds release calming sap. Modern botanists will discover the plant. Contains trace salicylic acid, ancient chewable aspirin hiding in plain sight. Alexandrides corners you near a brazier. Your god promised no chaos. He growls between coughs that puff ash from coals. You remind him Dionysus actually tried courtesy shrine detours, diluted cups, decorative vines. Decorative? He gestures out the door where green cords. Now scale every facade like an overeager tailor measuring for festival bunting. By afternoon, the city may look like it married a vineyard and a shotgun wedding dot at that moment. The god himself saunters in, barefoot, humming a lullaby suspiciously pitched to ease bronchial tubes. 6 soldiers quiet, eyelids drooping as if. Note stroke fevers. He kneels beside the worst-off youth, lifts a cup of water, and breathes across its surface. Steam curls upward, scented faintly with thyme and must. The youth sips, color returning. Witnesses exchange wide-eyed glances somewhere between relief and fear of witnessing sorcery. The captain seizes opportunity. Lift this plague, he demands, and the city will grant your micro-festival. 3 hours of structured revel, nothing more. Micro-festival sounds like a toy edition of chaos, batteries not included. Joke number 2. You picture pamphlets reading, now with 30% less orgy. Dionysus lifts an eyebrow. My revel cures by excess, not by ration. Yet he considers the bargain, twirling a vine tip between fingers. Behind him, priestess Ivy Robe, fresh from Artemis's shrine, arrives carrying a cedar box. She opens it to reveal a wreath woven half from laurel, half from ivy duality and horticultural form. Compromise, she says softly. Sparta loves laurel, you love ivy. Crown our city with both. Perhaps illness fears mixed signals. The god slips the wreath onto his curls, then extends it to the captain. Wear this, he instructs. Alexandrite's pale's ivy on a Spartan headpiece breaks at least 3 verses of last night's slam law recital. But men around him wheeze like rusted bellows. Petty protocol bends quicker than spines. He places the wreath atop his crest, and a hush floods the infirmary. Dionysus claps one sharp, echoing in the vines outside ripple as if a breeze learned choreography. Leaves release a cool scent, something between mint and fresh split fig. Within minutes, the coughs dull. Beads of sweat vanish from foreheads. Even you feel sinuses unclogging, as though someone replaced your head's sand with sea air. Soldiers, sit up. Testing breaths like new shields. Mainstream fact number 2 strolls in to annotate. Ancient Greeks burned ivy mixed with myrtle as makeshift fumigation during outbreaks. Recent lab tests show the smoke carries mild antimicrobial oils. Looks like Myth's pharmacy just rang up a refill. Word races through the agora faster than helot runners. Dionysus cures plague. Ivy breath saves phalanx. Rumor outruns phlegm. Joke number 3 surfaces. You remark to a passing merchant that the new Spartan battle cry might become a chula. He laughs, buying 2 vines to drape. On his cart for good luck. By midday, coughing shields hang forgotten on racks. Smiths resume hammering, the rhythm now echoing last night's youth panpipes. Queues form at the fountain where maenads dilute wine into communal basins, strict 4-to-1 ratio, city mandated. People sip nervously, then with visible pleasure when no lightning bolt arrives. Shadows of scowling ephors loom at periphery, but even they can't deny clear lungs and steady drill lines. A council runner finds you near the training track. Ephors reconvene at dusk, he says, breathless, to draft terms for the micro-Dionysia. He nearly chokes on the word like it's a spicy olive pit. Your presence requested apparently loophole advisory now has a seat. You nod, recalling the wall vines, the sesame bread, the youths improvising legal musicals. Sparta's stone heart hasn't melted, but it's sweating just enough to lubricate gears of change. As sun tilts west, you perch on a ledge above the city, counting shields hung to dry in barracks courtyards. Each polished bronze disc reflects a sky scrubbed clean of cough clouds, evidence the whisper plague receded as quickly as it arrived. Below, ivy shadows dance on cobbles, sketching temporary tattoos the masons never planned. You ponder that scholarly. Question again, are sudden mythic plagues post-event exaggerations or coded histories of real pathogens? Tonight, all you know is that fear creates symptoms as effectively as microbes, and a god with good bedside manner can cure both with equal flair. Down on the training field, hoplites perform drill spear thrust, shield up time to distant pipes. What would Lycurgus say? You suspect he'd recite another rule, but perhaps, secretly, he'd tap a toe before yelling, again. The ivy climbs higher, yet stops shy of blocking sight lines on the wall respectful coverage, not siege. A living ceasefire banner waving. Green. As drums rumble in the distance, you sense the city shifting from resisting to rehearsing what coexistence might sound like. 3 hours of sanctioned revel. Maybe that's the wedge. Maybe the gate stays cracked long after the schedule ends. Either way, dawn will find fewer coughs, more music, and a wreath that mixes laurel with ivy discipline hugging delight without bruising. Dusk bathes the agora in honey orange light, turning each ivy-striped column into a candied spear that even the sternest hoplite might secretly lick. You thread through the merchant stalls now repurposed as negotiation stations. Here a baker offers sesame rolls for ritual crumbs. There a blacksmith volunteers to clang cymbals, strictly for timekeeping. Joke number 1 drones in your ear when Spartans start labeling pastries and percussion as public service. You know, the paperwork got wet. At the fountain's edge stands a pop-up council, 2 F4s. The high priest of Apollo, a Myclay, a visiting. Delphic envoy who looks like he slept in a wine press, and priestess Ivy Robe from Artemis's shrine. Each holds a wax tablet like a tiny shield, jabbing styluses instead of spears. Captain Alexandrides hovers too, crowned in his laurel ivy compromise, eyes flicking between Dionysus and the rulemakers as though refereeing a duel in invisible ink. The agenda: draft terms for Sparta's first micro-Dionysia. The mood: a goat, balancing on a spear point, uncertain but impressive while it lasts. You claim a spot beside Ivy Robe, ready to whisper loophole intel. She hands you a reed pen, dipped in diluted wine, ink of reconciliation. She winks. You suspect she just likes poetic stationery, that you play along. Mainstream historical fact read shotgun. Classical polis administrations often pass temporary. Festival exemptions, known as paramonai, to relax standard law without rewriting. Athens did it for dramatic competitions. Thebes for Hercules feasts. Sparta, of course, has no paramonai precedent, so tonight's scribes must invent one on the fly. First point: time limit. The conservative F4 proposes 1 hour. Dionysus arches a brow so high it could moonlight as a sundial. Ivy Robe counters with sunset to first rooster. Compromise lands at 3 hours, dusk till moon mid-sky, enforced by sounding of a bronze gong. Joke number 2 sneaks to your lips. You mutter that Sparta just scheduled fun with the same precision they deploy spears. A nearby satyr snickers, nearly blowing his diplomatic cover. Second point: beverage protocol. Captain insists on the 4-to-1. Water to wine ratio logged earlier. Dionysus suggests the inverse. Debate spirals into math theater ratios, pirouetting like drunken Euclid. You propose a sliding scale: 4-to-1 for elders, 3-to-1 for active soldiers, 2-to-1 for performers. Priests scribble, nod. Ivy Robe adds a flourish. All drinks served in shallow kylix cups to discourage chugging. Quirky tidbit glides in. Archaeologists found kylix with inner images that appear only when the cup empties. Drink to the picture. Psychology used to pace consumption. Third point: performance zones. The Apollo priest insists temple precincts remain off limits. Dionysus agrees. Less flute squeals outshine lyre hymns. Yet he requests use of the training track as dance floor or ironic repurposing, sure to irk stone-faced drill masters. Alexandrides hesitates, then concedes. He'd rather guard one field than chase revelers down back alleys. A quick note: shields may be stacked to create an impromptu stage. Spartan practicality merging with Bacchic flair like bronze kissing. Ivy. Fourth point: costume. The F4s want plain wool. Dionysus wants leopard print. The Delphic envoy, finally useful, quotes Pythian motto: Mu Eta Delta Nu Gamma Alpha Nu. Nothing in excess, and suggests sashes of patterned cloth over standard chitons. Approved. Joke number 3 whispers: expect tomorrow's forge queue filled with soldiers, begging blacksmiths to etch leopard spots onto breastplates for balance training. Fifth point: public safety. A Helot physician proposes ivy leaf incense burners positioned every 10 paces to keep yesterday's cough at bay. Some grumble, but nobody wants to relive the phlegm opera. Dionysus supplies bundles of dried vine. And time. The Apollo priest blesses them, a joint signature on a healing waiver. Historians still argue whether ancient public health measures were driven more by science or superstition. Tonight, City Hall signs both columns with clauses hammered out. The final wax tablet waits for signatures. The senior F4, stylus trembling, etches his name first time. A Spartan magistrate inks a festival to honor merriment rather than warfare. Or harvest. Ivy Robe signs next, followed by Dionysus with a flourish so elaborate it sprouts a sprig of real ivy embossed into the wax. You scribble last as observer, partly to immortalize your loophole consultancy, partly because someone must footnote this madness later. Terms sealed, the council calls town criers. Bronze horns blare across plazas. Hear the citizens. 3-hour Dionysia begins at sunset, attendance voluntary, caution mandatory. Some Spartans peek from doorways as though summons might bite. Others grin behind palms, already tasting. Diluted adventure. The news spreads like warm honey on black bread. Preparations ignite. Helots string torch lines from barracks to training track. Smiths flatten bronze scraps into handheld symbols, passing them to youths who giggle at the unspartan shininess. Maenads choreograph modest dances, no swirling bare limbs, just rhythmic foot pivots and grapevine steps, pun intended. Soldiers sweep the track, chalking hoplite formation lines into dance lanes so bodies remember discipline even while shaking hips. Mainstream fact number. 2 strolls into high five. The Greeks used the pyrrhish, a war dance, as both drill and entertainment. Tonight's micro Dionysia will remix that martial spin with softer gestures. Culture meet compromise playlist out sunset ambers the horizon, and you hear the bronze gong toll once, twice, thrice marking festival ignition. Ivy-scented burners flare, releasing mint earth perfume. Folks flock cautiously, elders with walking staves, children clutching barley cakes, shield-bearing warriors loosening chin straps as a signal they're off duty. Dionysus appears center field, flanked by 2 youths on borrowed panpipes. He raises. His watered wine salutes the laurel ivy wreath still perched on Anaxandroid's head, and recites, "Joy asked discipline for a dance. Discipline accepted. Let no foot misstep." Music starts, drums tempered, pipes gentle. The first volunteers are those law-reciting lads from last night. They lead a circle, spears upside down as dance canes. Elders clap in 6/8 time, shocked, to find they remember rhythm. Even the stoic F4 with the former wine stain taps a sandal. Ivy leaves tremble on the walls, not growing this time but vibing, content. You step back, absorbing the tableau. Iron City wearing a velvet evening shrug. Lights flicker against new greenery. Bread and diluted wine circulate. And coughs have evaporated into laughter-peppered air. An open scholarly debate phrase surfaces in your mind. Historians still argue whether moments like these were fleeting anomalies or catalysts for lasting cultural shifts. You watch shield edges catch torchlight, gleaming not as borders, but as mirrors reflecting faces suddenly softer, and silently cast your vote for catalyst. When the bronze gong tolls the final chime, the micro Dionysia winds down with surprisingly little chaos, no shattered amphory, no unplanned human pyramid disasters, just a handful of hoplites discovering that grape-stained sandals squeak on marble. Captain Anaxandrides orders torches doused one by one, but lanterns along the Agra remain lit for post-event civic reflection, which in plain Greek means everybody's too awake to crawl into bed just yet. You drift toward the stoa where thinkers loiter, sleeves rolled, brains fizzing like overwatered wine. Joke number 1 prances through your mind. Philosophers are the only people who can turn an after-party into a conference call with eternity. Stone benches line the arcade. On one sits old Chillin the laconic, beard braided neat as a javelin shaft. Nearby sprawls Metrodamos the Epicurean, robe half undone, still smelling of diluted Cabernet. Between them spark the night's freshest embers of argument, which safeguards a polis discipline or delight. Passers-by form an impromptu amphitheater, cups in hand, popcorn substituted with sesame crumbs filched from the baker's ritual tray. Chillin opens with the obvious. A city is only as strong as the lungs of its phalanx. He cites drill attendants, iron currency, and, yes, black broth. Mainstream historical fact nods beside him. Spartan hoplites maintained the longest unbroken military record in Greece for nearly 3 centuries, rarely losing pitched battle until Leuctra shattered that streak. Every soldier within earshot puffs chest at the reminder. Metrodamus counters, swirling his legal 2-to-1 mix. And what fills those lungs, friend? Air warmed by song. He gestures to the vines ornamenting the colonnade, still respectful, still alive. A people granted no joy grows brittle. Strike them, they shatter. The crowd ooze. Someone bets 2 obols that Chillin's beard quivers when he's cornered. It does, just a little. You lean against a column, thinking of that. Earlier cough plague, how fear shrank chests tighter than real disease, and how ivy steam loosened both throats and rules. Joke number 2 slips out to the soldier beside you. If laughter were a weapon, we'd all need shield polish twice a day. He snorts diluted wine through his nose, which technically counts as a mild disinfectant dot an apprentice scribe volunteers. To moderate, he draws 2 columns in wax, alpha sigma tau eta rho j tau eta sigma, austerity, and epsilon phi rho omicron sigma mu nu eta, merriment. Under the first, he lists discipline's trophies, endurance, loyalty, punctual perimeter walls. Under the second, innovation, morale, cross-polis trade, because parties lure merchants. A wicker ballot box appears from nowhere. Listeners drop pebbles to vote. Already you sense an upset. Merriment's pebbles clack louder than anyone expected. Chillin', sensing momentum drift, unleashes the philosopher's ace fear of entropy. Delight seeps, he warns, like water through sandals. Soon shields sag, spears dull, children forget oaths. Metrodomos claps slowly. Water nurtures vines. Vines fed us tonight, he retorts. Who fought better, the coughing soldiers at dawn or the singing ones at dusk? Even Anaxandride's eyebrow arches toward the merriment column. A helot potter ambles over, hefting a freshly fired kylix still warm from kill. Its interior image unveiled by a swirl of wine shows Leonidas toasting with Dionysus. The crowd hoots. Quirky Tidbit arrives riding that cup. Some fringe artisans in Corinth secretly circulated crossover. Pottery hashing unlikely god hero friendships. Collectors later misread them as bloopers, but maybe they were philosophical fan fiction about low letter. Behind you, faint flute scales drift from the training track where the youth brigade now cools down after dance duty, stamping rhythms into dust. Their melody slithers beneath debate like sneaky footnotes, making every rhetorical pause sound suspiciously musical. Historians still argue whether Sparta preserved such melodies in formal archives or let them evaporate each sunrise. The open debate phrase whispers inside your skull. Tonight, at least parchment has competition from ears. Chillin' fires. Alas folly, the tale of King Cleomenes, who allegedly went mad after overindulging in foreign wine. A sober warning, he cries. Metrodomos tilts head, or a mad warning about chronic dehydration. Laughter detonates. Joke number 3 high-fives your inner jester. You observe that madness also strikes men who recite law scrolls past bedtime exhibit A, last night's tablet brigade. Even Chillin' chuckles, beard braid shaking like a tassel on the world's driest pinata, time to tally. The scribe upends the box. Pebble mountain under merriment, respectable hill under austerity. Chillin bows to result but raises one finger. Balance, he concedes. Discipline builds walls. Delight plants vines, so the sun doesn't bleach them bare. Metrodomos claps, sealing compromise with a lap of watered wine poured politely onto flagstones for the household gods. You step back, considering how earlier walls sprouted ivy of their own accord, physical echo of this new philosophy. The Agra, once a sparse parade ground, now hosts a thin scatter of musical stands. Incense braziers, and yes, still pristine shield stacks. The city hasn't shed armor, just learn to accessorize it. In that glow, you glimpse a future where trolls keep. Time to Flutes and Black Broth shares menu space with Rouge version 2.0. The bronze gong strikes thrice, Micro Dionysia officially over, yet no one bolts home. Philosophers trade scroll references. Soldiers compare toe-tap patterns. Merchants calculate profit margins on ivy seedlings. You catch the scribe scratching. A new title across his wax, Retro Addendum, the Joy Clause. Whether it survives tomorrow's committee purge is uncertain, but the fact it exists at all feels seismic as lanterns dim. You wander to the ballot box, pocket one pebble from each column's souvenirs of doubt and delight. They clink together. Refusing segregation, you imagine tossing them into Eurota's river where currents mix them forever. The thought eases something in your chest, like untying a too-tight cloak string. Across the square, Dionysus leans against a pillar, eyes half-lidded, watching debates dissolve into late-night goodwill. He doesn't intervene. Victory tonight isn't vines on walls or ratios in cups. It's questions asked aloud where once only orders barked. You meet his gaze, lift your twin pebbles, and he nods, as if to say the polis finally holds both stones in one steady hand. The moon has shouldered its way past Tychidus, leaving only a rag and bone sliver, so you travel by starlight, the milky way pouring overhead like a spilt amphora. Nobody's brave enough to mop. Each step down the colonnade sounds softer than the last, partly because sandal leather absorbs fatigue, partly because the city itself exhales at last 3 hours of regulated revel have concluded without anybody surrendering a spear, a virtue, or a kidney. You trace a fingertip along the ivy-tasseled wall and feel its pulse. Faint but stubborn, as though the vine is dozing with one eye open, waiting for encore season tickets. Joke number 1 ambles out. You wonder if Sparta's maintenance crews will build the god under unauthorized landscaping. Past the agora, the streets pinch into hush. A lone torch guttering in an alcove reveals members of the Cryptia, the secret youth patrol slipping toward outer hamlets. Daggers tucked, ready to enforce midnight clauses. Mainstream historical fact drifts beside them, the Cryptia trained. Elite Spartans to navigate darkness, eavesdrop, and test courage, often stalking helots under moonless skies. Tonight, though, they seem half distracted, humming the Pyrrhish rhythm they sneakily learned during dance duty. Even covert ops can't shake earworms. You skirt the fortification now quilted with ivy lace, each leaf cupping a bead of dew that refracts starlight into cat-eye glints. Somewhere behind stone blocks, an insomniac philosopher rehearses fresh arguments for tomorrow's assembly, voice carrying like a cricket with tenure. Quirky tidbit flits by. Sages claim dew collected from star reflections cures eye strain. You swipe a leaf, dab a drop, and decide placebo. Tastes faintly of hope. Beyond the training track lies the small family quarter where hearth embers still glow. You pass a doorway and overhear soft singing Maenad lullaby, adapted for Spartan toddlers. Lyrics trimmed of scandal but melody intact. Mothers hum, fathers pretend not to tap feet, yet infant fists pump along, inventing a choreography for people not yet issued ration knives. Historians still argue whether domestic spheres ever truly escaped the Agogi's iron orbit, or if lullabies like these smuggled tenderness back into barracks-bred households one note at a time. Either way, tonight's cradle songs owe royalties to a leopard-cloaked composer near the Eurotas footbridge. You stumble upon 2 satyrs and a hoplite sharing roasted chestnuts. They offer you one, you crunch it, smoky and sweet. The hoplite admits he originally confiscated the nuts as contraband or d'oeuvres, but decided evidence preservation tasted better than bureaucracy. Joke number 2 sparks, you remark. That culinary chain of custody ends where hunger begins. Laughter fogs the chill air. For 3 strangers on opposite ends of the discipline spectrum, a single snack splices bedtime camaraderie into the record. Past the bridge, the riverside path opens wide. Reeds whisper, stirred by breeze that wafts thyme and wood smoke. You pull the bone flute from your belt, faithful hitchhiker of the night, give it 2 soft owl hoots, and watch a real owl swivel its head, offended by intellectual property theft. Stars shimmer like coins scattered by careless gods. You recall those pebble ballots clinking in your pouch, symbols of tension resolved not by victory but by inclusion. Discipline and delight sharing tight quarters without declaring war. Joke number 3 lifts off. If coinmints ever catch on to this, they'll stamp one side with a spear, the other with a grape, and charge double for philosophical currency dot ahead. Rises a knoll studded with cypress. Your original goat path vantage from section 1. You climb, knees creaking like inexperienced chorus props, and sit where cicadas once mimicked unplugged phone chargers. Below, Sparta sleeps roofs glinting faintly, ivy trellising walls, torch embers blinking Morse code goodnights. Dionysus's entourage camps beyond the outer farms. Faint tambourine tinklings reach your ears, restrained, respectful, yet undeniably alive. You tilt back, letting constellations fill your field of vision. Orion still stands sentinel, but tonight the hunter seems to rest his bow, perhaps listening to ground-level negotiations. The cosmic backdrop smells of pine tar, cold quartz, and the ghost of diluted wine. You can't tell whether you're buzzed, or simply steeped in more oxygen than before, but a gentle equilibrium settles like a shield balanced on fingertips. Spinning, defying gravity because both sides learn to share the axis. A distant gong half-hearted final call drifts upward, signaling curfew. Yet no guard hustles you. Maybe the watch has adopted a new clause. If a traveler's eyes mirror starshine, let him finish the page. You close yours briefly, hearing again the crack of tablets, the hush of vines, the cough subsiding beneath ivy steam. In that mental mixtape, the sharpest note belongs to neither drum nor decree, but to a single grape stain blossoming into ivy on an Ephor's cloak a tiny. Audacious autograph reminding mortals that permanence is just stubborn change wearing yesterday's uniform. One last inhale. The air carries brewing weather dawn will likely paint clouds pink as watered wine. You pocket the twin pebbles, tuck bone flute against chest, and rise. Navigation lights are no longer necessary. You know the route, and the route astonishingly knows you back. Discipline and delight keep pace on either shoulder, unbothered by the other's boot prints. You descend the knoll toward sleep, footsteps sinking to a beat that belongs equally to black broth spoons and leopard print tambourines. The path levels, the stones beneath your soles smoothing into a quiet, familiar rhythm, each step a softer. Hush, each hush a gentle tug toward rest. Voices fade behind shutters, vines settle, and even the river lowers its whisper to a silk-thin murmur. Like pages turning at the far end of a library, you feel the night thicken into a velvet pelt around your shoulders, warm despite the breeze, and every breath lengthens, drawing in cool time and letting out spent worry. Up above, constellations drift westward in patient procession. Their light is older than the walls, older than any law, yet it falls kindly on both spear and leaf without choosing sides. You watch one star, then another, until the sky becomes a slow tide of silver, ebbing thought from thought, leaving only the bright simplicity of here, of now, of gentle lungs pulling quiet into quiet. That bone flute rests beneath your hand, no longer urgent for melody, happy to lie silent, content that night already hums its own lullaby. Somewhere, a final owl call folds into distance, its echo lingering just long enough to remind you that even hunters pause to dream. Notice how your shoulders loosen, how your jaw unclenches, how the muscles behind your eyes forget the shape of worry. In this soft darkness, everything sharp blurs ivy and armor alike, dissolving into silhouettes, into outlines, into faint impressions ready to slip behind eyelids. Let them. Let thoughts drift like leaf boats on a wide, gentle current, unhurried, unafraid, carried exactly where they need to go. And as those boats glide farther, the shoreline of waking life recedes. The hum of distant drums dims to a memory's heartbeat, and sleep steady, calm, inevitable steps forward, wraps its cloak around your mind, and guides you inward toward the sweetest silence.